Hello and welcome to the GIS NTN live coverage of St. Lucia's General Elections 2021, dubbed Decision 2021. We are simulcast on DBS and radio stations WVent and Rhythm FM, continuing on with the broadcast for today for you. We started our day off for this general election with a broadcast featuring Lissa Joseph, also Timothy Polion and Primus Hutchinson, bringing you the latest in terms of the word from the electoral office, as well as updates out in the field. We know we've partnered up with the DBS television station to bring you the latest out in the field. So we heard from many of my colleagues as well as myself out there in various locations. My name is Jessie Leonce, by the way. If you're just joining, good afternoon to you. We hope that you found some time in between the hype that is the general election to have some lunch and stay full. I'm joined in studio by my colleague, journalist colleague, Mr. Earl Bousquet. And also we have a political analyst joining us as well, Mr. Thomas Samuel. Good afternoon to you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Feels good to be here. Glad to be part of this collaborative media effort.
Absolutely. Tell us what are some of your observations, Mr. Bousquet, coming up in the lead up to today's national exercise. We know that we are conducting the general election under unprecedented circumstances, the COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned it, that what makes COVID-19 makes this the different election that it is. Quite apart from that, we have seen many precedents set in terms of the number of candidates, the number of independents, the number of parties, the arrangements between parties. Everything leading up to the elections has been different. The issues remain the same. COVID affects every issue in terms of how people interpret it, and at the end of the day, the election is the 11th since independence, and it is one that will certainly leave its mark as St. Lucia's most different election, quite apart from 1987, having had two in one. Mm-hmm. I think quite apart from the COVID effect, like I said, during the course of today, we will certainly be looking at the different factors that make this year different. But in most of my writings, I've tended to refer to it as the mother and father of all elections.
Wonderful. We're just going to stick a pin in our engagement. Coming to you, Mr. Samuel, in just a moment. But we have on the line Dr. Gail Rigobert, who is the incumbent for Micoud North, the Micoud North constituency, and also serving as the deputy political leader of the United Workers' Party. She is being introduced by DBS's Don and Nicholas. Good afternoon to you both. Hi, good day. Okay, Don Nicholas, can you hear me? Okay, we have the optics now.
Yes, I'm here, Jesse. I'm here with Dr. Rigobert.
Good day, Dr. Rigobert.
Hello, can I show you my finger?
Good job, exercising your right.
Thank you very much.
What was, seldom we ask this question, but what was your voting experience like, Dr. Rigobert?
This being the third time around, it was equally, if not more, emotional. More so because there are very poignant moments in your life. You know, we call them milestones, when you really recall those you love to share those moments with who are not here with you. So I really remembered my parents when I was on that queue. And that fueled me even more to give more of myself, to make a greater contribution, because that is what life should be about. Giving back, especially when we're from such a small community, a community in a country that really have invested so much in us. And so giving back is an honor. And for the Mipo people, the people of Mipo North, to third time around say to me very loudly, I endorse you. I entrust you with the future of my loved ones. And that says a lot. This is not just about being elected. This is about the faith that people have in you and your party to enhance their well-being, their livelihoods, their circumstance. And we've proven for the past 5 years that we can do that. And I trust that this year, especially with our 545, that solutions will be even more convinced, given our delivery record, that we can do it.
Thank you for that, Dr. Rigobert. I also want to ask if you could, just getting an indication of your roundabouts, the constituency for today. Tell us the extent of, the work that you have done today, perhaps, because we've heard some of the candidates assisting individuals in getting by. Can you speak on some of the difficulties that some persons might be experiencing, if at all, in your constituency in getting to vote?
Not more than usual. There was a little bit of rain this morning, so thank God we had a rain plan. So we had to employ our, rainy day, election day plan, and that works beautifully. I hope the umbrellas left at the various stores. I feel as if we swept them up. But now the sun is out, and so people are coming out in droves. We have and always make special provision for the vulnerable, for the elderly, for the disabled, and those who need assistance for one reason or another. And we did that today as well. And I must say that people are very grateful for that service, because it just makes life so much easier. And for those who are very concerned about the length of the queues and how long it will take, but it may have something to do with what time you go to vote or how large your constituency is. But I spent under 20 minutes or so waiting in line. So maybe I got there at a good hour.
But could it also have to do with the late changes in the polling stations and so on, because a few more tents will be erected and so on?
That certainly has helped to the extent that the electoral office has expanded its capacity at the various polling divisions to allow for that means of access, of course, to offset any delays that might have been caused by having to observe the COVID-19 protocols.
Yes, Jesse, I don't know if you have any more questions, but we were actually having a nice discussion just before you joined us live.
Nice.
We were talking about, sorry?
I said nice.
Okay, yeah, we were talking about the rise of the internet and the social media as an election campaign tool and how it has taken off at elections these days. So we were talking about some of the advantages and disadvantages of the social media. So maybe I can ask Dr. Rigobert to reiterate some of what we were talking about in terms of the advantages and disadvantages.
So notwithstanding all the negativity surrounding COVID-19 and the many challenges that we've had to overcome, one of the benefits of conducting an election campaign in the COVID-19 pandemic was that we really got to experience firsthand the level of creativity and innovation of our people, especially our young people. I was just reflecting a moment ago, the songs, the music videos. If you just sit back away from the politics and you remove your colored lenses, so to speak, and just appreciate the music for what it is, there's a lot of creativity there. There's a lot to celebrate. Certainly the creative industry has been able to leverage the technology in the way that we expect and anticipate, which is why, incidentally, if I may, that in very short order, the South Louis Community College will be hosting a course for persons from the creative industries to better enable them to leverage technology in the use of their creative art form. And we saw some of that during this campaign. That's the good stuff. The bad stuff is, it is not a highly policed space, and so each user is really led by his own conscience and moral parameters. And really any old thing can be said if that's what one's conscience can accommodate. And the venom, the acrimony, the hatred, the disrespect that was so evident during the campaign, regrettably, casts a really dark cloud over politics. There's a way in which you can engage in political banter without losing your dignity, without losing your decorum, your decency.
Mm-hmm.
And we can
Wonderful.
disagree with voice, it doesn't always have to be sent into a gutter fight. So I really regret that. Now, I was just reflecting to Don that I do pray that St. Lucia does not find itself having difficulty attracting talented, ambitious young people into the politics, because it becomes such a dark space that people are not encouraged to participate, especially women. Women get a few blows more than men by virtue of being female, and so the expectations are different, certainly higher. And I want to say to young women out there, if it is your calling to give back to the community, if it is your divine call to become a politician, it is an honorable profession. Please do not be dissuaded by the mudslinging. If in your mind, your heart, your conscience, you know who you are, if your loved ones know who you are, you really must find it within you to just deflect the negativity, stay focused, and live in purpose.
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned the issue of women in politics, because what we noted in the yesteryears is that it was more male-dominated, and very few women, played an active role in the political arena. So we've noticed that over the past few years, more women have come on board, and I think this year we have 11. If I stand corrected on that, but I think it's 11.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think has attributed
Don?
female interest in politics?
Well, it is no secret that we have more women assuming leadership positions in various sectors in our society. And so why should the political realm not benefit similarly? I'm really encouraged, really heartened to see so many women joining. It is an honorable profession. It's fun. It is gratifying. It is really fulfilling. And especially if you are intrinsically motivated and you are driven by the very tangible, material, evident changes that you can make in the lives of people, that is more than any salary can compensate
Thank
for.
you.
Just to put a smile on someone's face. So
Wonderful.
I wish that more women would join. It's cool, and I look sometimes from where you sit.
Wonderful,
like,
wonderful.
Oh my God. But I do believe truly you've got to be ordained to do this. So for the many
Absolutely.
women out there whose calling it is to give back to the community, don't be shy. If I did it, you can as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rigobert. Don, we have to stick a pin in it. We have to stick a pin in that interview. But there you have it, word from Dr. Gail Rigobert, career educator, representative, government minister, having represented the constituency of Micoud North. Thank you so very much for that. I'm sure, Don, you can continue that interview, and so we can put that in the holster for a subsequent broadcast. Much appreciated. Well, we need to continue. Just to give you some backstory, Dr. Rigobert won her Miku North seat in the 2011 general election and was elected deputy political leader in 2013. She has also in 2014 she did serve as the leader of the opposition in Parliament, and also in 2016 she was also successful at the polls again. So that was Dr. Rigobert there, just speaking to us on her voting experience and speaking to us on the assistance that has been provided to persons, constituents who are desirous of voting and perhaps are encountering some challenges, and also an appeal going out to young women who are interested in politics to do take it up. What do you make of that, Mr. Bousquet?
Well, it's easy to make perennial calls that are unmistakably well intended, but historically the facts have proven that women prefer to be campaigners than to be campaigned for. Nearly every politician or candidate can tell you they have to depend primarily on their women supporters.
Interesting.
And the extent to which women have been prepared to or encouraged to take that power to influence change and progress, to see it as something that women can do as people, rather than women having to help
a disciple.
Yeah, you know, I constantly remember situations where candidates there would be one candidate, a male going up against a female, and the criticisms of the female candidate by the female candidate from the other side would be louder and deeper than ordinary criticism of a male candidate. And I think this is something that needs some study, because invariably you ask a very active woman supporter, how about women? And say, me, our. You know, there's always, and I think it has to do with the historical, not just the feeling that men are superior and that politics is led by men. Women have shown that that is just a historical coincidence.
Or that perhaps women are better at mobilization.
Yes, certainly. That has been our history, and that is why I'm saying that we either deliberately men are not encouraging them to transfer that power to themselves and other women. In the same way they are good at mobilizing their families, their neighbors, the community for a candidate, man or woman. They should also be prepared to, for example, have that same zest and zeal for workshops for young women on why they should be joining politics. Similarly, for women to be leading workshops for young men.
But Mr. Samuel, I want to bring you on this whole gender parity subject. Hasn't it, based on the trends, shown that it is in the political party's best interest to perhaps engage more women in the candidates' fold?
Well, Jesse, I would think so. Given the trends in the wider society across various demographics, we see women demonstrating, their capacity to perform in almost every sphere of our society. Especially, we have seen in education, in business, in our society, that women have, not been in any way handicapped by tradition or any kind of sort of preconceived notions. And so I think, given the business of politics, where you need reliable supports and surrogates, certainly I think women, by their very meticulous nature and organized nature, will certainly bring some skills that would be very welcome and useful to putting together a good campaign. It would be, perhaps it would help us delve and drill a bit further into understanding more so the role of women in voting and so on. If we could sort of augment some of the statistics that we have on the national the electoral site to look at gender distributions as well. For sure, if you look across in the canvassers, for example, a lot of the canvassers across the parties, we notice a lot of young ladies, and I guess that's where that nurturing ground will start to get familiar, and perhaps that'll change the trend and the appetite going forward. We may see more women. Already we are seeing one party, for example, the United Workers' Party has, I think, 5 female candidates. That is probably groundbreaking in itself. In the past we have had 1 or 2, and across the region we have had female prime ministers now. I think there are just basically no limits. Our women are distinguishing themselves in every sphere of human endeavor, sports. I mean, Laverne, Spencer, we have all over indicators of role models of our females. So I think it's not a foregone conclusion. I mean, it's not something that unlikely to have female head of police or prime minister. All of that is possible. We have had Governor General already. So I am encouraged and not in any way discouraged by anything. I think women are certainly blazing the trail and will do well in anything that they're doing.
Okay.
Including politics. Yes.
Yeah. And speaking of women in leadership roles, we have on the line the chief of the Electoral Observation Mission of the Organization of American States joining us, since she's in St. Lucia. That is Miss Mary Carmen Plata. Good day to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Wonderful. The Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS began its deployment to observe the general elections in St. Lucia from the 19th of July. Am I correct?
We arrived here on the 20th, and we actually started conducting our meetings on the 21st.
Okay, just tell us a bit about the process that the observer team has gone through in these past few weeks.
Yes, well, we are a team of 12 that has been deployed for this election in particular. We represent 10 different nationalities. So we do our observations based on basically the meetings that we hold before the date to determine the issues pertaining to the pre-electoral or preparation phase. And we review things such as methodologies, the technology employed, logistics. We're looking at protocols right now, health protocols, which are very relevant during this time because of the COVID pandemic. We're also looking at issues pertaining, you were talking about this before, the participation of women, and overall the structuring and preparation for the elections.
Okay. Now, leading up to today, well, I know you had a meeting, you met with you visited the Darren Sammy Cricket Stadium polling station. If you just speak to us about that experience today and also your subsequent engagement with the press.
Yes, well, we visited it this morning, so we were actually there. I was there personally. The team is deployed in different areas and different polling stations, but I was personally there when it opened this morning. So we were able to see how it has evolved during the day. In the morning, we saw long lines, which was indicative of a large participation. It's something that we like to see, a lot of people engaged and participating in the election. And we followed the process, and then we again visited at noon. And then we saw that the flow of people had lessened a little bit, so it was lower than in the morning, which showed that the process is actually moving along as expected. We did notice things such as the lettering for things regarding protocols and health and so forth. So those are the types of things that we observe. The location of the polling stations and how they're distributed, the lines and these things.
Okay. How significant a place is our response to COVID-19 in terms of us having this general election? How significant a role will it play in the presentation of your findings ultimately?
Well, we've been deploying observations missions throughout the pandemic, so it's something that we already have our protocols for working in that regard, and it's something that we observe in this election in particular. We know that there have been protocols in place, and there was a preparation for the election. So basically, today we are observing how they may impact the flow of the election. What we have seen until now is that there are signage in different places, and people, generally speaking, are keeping to their lines, and we will continue observing the compliance with the protocols, and we invite anyone who has no voting and is going to vote to please follow the protocols, because it's in everybody's best interest to make sure that all the guidelines are properly followed.
Okay, now taking a closer look at COVID-19, what are some of the concerns that perhaps you would have observed in perhaps previous countries that would have held general elections during the pandemic? Some of the concerns that would inhibit the free flow of a general election?
Well, in this case in particular, I think what has been done in St. Lucia is similar to what has been done in other places in terms of having or creating special health protocols to make sure that the elections can take place in the way that is safest as possible for the population. So in that regard, that's something that we look at, and we review the protocols to make sure that people are properly informed. And this is something that will probably continue for a while, and we know that there are different stages of different situations, but in particular, it's mainly to understand what the protocols are and then compliance with the same.
Okay, and when can we expect the preliminary report with observations and recommendations?
We should have the preliminary report soon after the preliminary results are issued. So hopefully in the next couple of days, we should have the preliminary report out, and then the final report, which is more extensive and detailed, will be issued in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Ms. Plata, for your time. I know it has been a very hectic period for you. We wish you all the best and look forward to the conclusion.
Thank you very much, and again, my best regards to all the people of St. Lucia, and to continue coming out and participating in the election. I noticed that it's a very enthusiastic participation, and it's always good to see. Follow the health protocols and continue participating in the right to vote.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Ms. Plata. Mara Carmen Plata there, speaking to us, coming off of a meeting with the press earlier today at the Darren Sammy Cricket Grounds. That is a polling station. She did have a word with them, giving, the general thoughts, general feelings on the ground as to what is happening at the various polling stations. We can expect, as she indicated, a preliminary report with observations and recommendations coming from this electoral observation mission in the coming days. But in the meantime, we have the general election in full swing, St. Lucia, and not only St. Lucian citizens, but residents of St. Lucia. If you qualify, think long and hard. There is still time to cast your ballot. Go onto the election website, the electoral office website, to find out how you can go about casting your ballot today, where you are registered, if you are even registered to vote. Go there and get some information. We are due for a break right now. Just going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be hearing from Mr. Samuel, and he is a political analyst, giving us an overview of previous general elections here in St. Lucia. What are the trends telling us? Stay with us.
Département électoral qui a présenté et puis protocole COVID-19 pour élection générale l'année 2021. Sauveter tout le monde qui caille vote, bien important by département électoral. À ce jour élection, changer pour mener massou et pour tout le monde qui involvé, là il vient pour processer activité élection, obligé mettre masque en toute location côté élection qu'après coup. Tout le monde qui caille vote, caille trouver koyo sanitize en délocation. Ça c'est là où entrer en building là et avant on mettait tout en l'enclan. Tout protocole là il vient pour distance physique caille trouver koy observer. Là kay ni un système de bout en ligne en 100 yard là et passer 100 yard là en toutes ces polling station. Tout meb et équipement qui a servi en ces polling station caille trouver sanitize bien souvent. Boufla côté moun ka vote là et ces crayons yo ka servir caille trouver koy et sanitize après chaque moun qui vote. C'est Gide Sala, c'est protocole pour COVID-19, élection générale l'année 2021. Pour tout le monde qui caille vote, sauf.
St. Lucia, this is another opportunity for you to exercise your franchise, cast your ballot to vote for the next parliamentarians here in St. Lucia. We hope you are keeping safe nonetheless. We started the day with some inclement weather, and we hope persons going out and about were safe. There were no injuries, nothing happened. We hope you carried your umbrellas with you, keeping away from the rain. But for those of you going out today, we also hope that you are adhering to the COVID-19 protocols, and it is very important. I myself heading out this morning, I think it was at the Corinth secondary school. That's one of the Crystal Lake constituencies. We did notice a sort of clustering of the queues, and that is very much discouraged, particularly at this time. St. Lucia has not attained herd immunity, and we are still on the road to vaccinating more and more residents of St. Lucia to build our immunity overall. And until such time, we need to pretend, we need to act as if the person next to us has it. Use copious amounts of hand sanitizer. Make sure you have your mask on when you are engaging or if you're out in public, and also observe the 6-foot distance. It is very, very, very important that we do so. Yeah. Coming off of the last few interviews that we had this afternoon, we did hear from Dr. Gail Rigobert, and she is the incumbent for the constituency of Micoud North, and she is contesting the seat against two other candidates. They are Jeremiah Norbert from the St. Lucia Labour Party and Michael St. Catherine, an independent candidate. And she was speaking not only on the situation of more women entering politics in leadership roles, but also the emergence of social media being used as a tool during the campaign period. And we do have a presentation for you in terms of the trends for our our general elections here in St. Lucia. But before we come to that, the emergence of social media is something that is worthy of mention, worthy of a look over to determine its advantages, its disadvantages. Mr. Bousquet?
Yes, certainly. I have a very unpopular interpretation of the role and influence of social media. I would say up front that these views are coming from an IT caveman in the 21st century. Nonetheless, I think that, like you've said, social media is both, it has its pros and cons. It can be harmful and helpful. We have heard and continue to hear about all of the positive effects. Its role in encouraging young people to at least follow, participate and learn from, utilize IT as part of the learning process generally, and not only specifically for politics. But I also think that social media is hurting and harming Creole and reading. Reading, as we stand right now, as a result of the advances in IT, is becoming endangered. Reading is becoming endangered. Less people read. Less young people read. I do not really buy the argument about young people having a lesser retention span and therefore the rest of the world having to summarize everything because young people don't like to take a long time. I think I've seen young people sit down and watch long movies. And watch games, that play games all day long. So it's not only a matter of a short retention span. Creole as well, while the social media is utilized for abbreviated communication and everything, to what extent we as a bilingual country still, to what extent have we gone as far as necessary to integrate Creole in the social media fabric? And thirdly, we have the unpopular point about to what extent is really social media effective. I remember reading a 2020 report. I think that survey is done annually in the OECS, and that 2020 report, when one cuts through all of the jargon, basically what I interpreted from it and confirmed from both Flow and Digicel is that while as far back as the year 2000, the St. Lucia had the highest number of highest level of cell phone penetration among elderlies and persons over 60. that trend has continued. St. Lucia continues to have a higher number of persons generally using cell phones than the rest of the OECS. Similarly, a higher number of older persons and definitely a higher number of younger persons. However, the figures said to me words to the effect that 20% of the persons who use cell phones use them for information purposes, bandwidth or whatever you call it. And out of that 20%, only 18% use their cell phones for what we're depending on. Getting messages, important messages across through social media. If the figures I've tried to explain in layman's language match and you can pursue it, then it means that we might have been overhyping the effect of social media, and in allowing social media to take over our lives from the standpoint of the Internet of Things, we are seeing it not only in terms of the effect of the COVID on our election, but as a result of the COVID protocols and restrictions, the parties and candidates have had to resort to social media to launch manifestos, to have meetings, to get the message across. In that context, it would be interesting when the figures are all out to be able to assess to what extent more persons are being being met as assumed, or to what extent less persons are being reached than assumed. I think it is something worth studying, and like I said, the figures are out there, and I confirm with both Digicel and Flow persons that is a right interpretation, but I have not been able to convince social media enthusiasts to even think that maybe you might not be getting as far as you'd like to. But I'm sure we're going to have a lot of time to talk about that.
Absolutely. I definitely want to speak more on that and bring in Mr. Samuel in on that. I hope we're not taking away too much from his presentation already. But we just want to stick a pin in our conversation to welcome Herma DeMack, our very own from Viewfort North, I believe. She is covering this afternoon. Good afternoon, Herma. Talk to me.
Good afternoon, Jesse. Hi, Earl. You were very correct, Jesse, in saying that I covered the Viewfort North area as well as Viewfort South. But right now, we are at Bus Library. We were in close proximity, so we decided to come down and see what the atmosphere was there. Just before we get to Bus Library, just to give you quick update, we were actually quite people took the opportunity very, very early on, within 6 a.m. to about 8:30, 9 o'clock, to ensure that they go out to cast their ballots. So right now we're seeing lines that are quite easy. So if there are people within the Viewfort North or Viewfort South area looking to see whether or not they should go out and vote, now would be an opportune time. We also stopped by the Library Boys Primary School, and similarly the trend was the very, very same. The lines were quite easy. COVID-19 protocols in full effect, and we have to say it is quite commendable with the presiding officers and the officials within each of those polling stations ensuring that that is in effect. Right now we're in Bus Library, and as you can probably see behind me, this is what the looks like. It's one of seeing with a few more people, just to give you an idea. Those lines: the incumbent Alpha Baptist trying to retain his seat, as well as contender Francis Pierre. So it will be very, very interesting to see how that turns out. Within the Vieux South area, we were able to capture interviews with both of the candidates, who is Dr. Kenny.
Okay, Herma, can you hear me?
Looking to retain his seat, as well as Herma Francis. So these are interviews that we hope to bring to our viewers and listeners just a little bit.
That was Herma DeMarc. We seem to be having some technical difficulties associated with the internet, I believe, in connecting with her. But hopefully we can hear from her in just a moment. I think I got the gist of what she was saying, that they are covering Vieux Fort North and South, but they ventured out into Mance Laborie to just get an understanding of what is happening there as well, visiting the Laborie Boys School and other polling stations in that vicinity. And definitely she's indicating that the COVID-19 protocols are in full effect. You also have other protocols associated with the polling stations in full effect as well, and things moving along smoothly. We now want to cut to a scene of the Prime Minister, who went out to vote earlier today. So I was told that I was told that it was very short, so I think we should, yeah. So we're going to go to that clip from the Prime Minister going out to vote, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that constituency, the constituency which he is contending, incumbent for.
Very excited, just got to vote, and I see people coming out in record numbers. I'm going to continue to say to everyone, please exercise patience. Because of COVID and these new protocols that are put in place, nobody wants to disenfranchise you. It's going to take a little bit longer. Be patient, and let's make sure that everybody can vote. Continue to be safe.
There you have it, a clip of the Prime Minister showing his finger as proof of having exercised his franchise, and of course asking for persons to remain patient. And I mean, certain locations, certain polling stations island-wide. I just want to go back to the Corinth Secondary School as a polling location, also the Vidbote Secondary School, Patricia James Secondary School. You had persons coming up in large numbers coming out to vote, and sometimes, you know, based on the procedure by which the polling stations are calling persons to vote in alphabetical chunks, some persons may have to wait a while. And so the Prime Minister, the Micoud South incumbent, is calling for patience to be exercised at this time. And so in Micoud South, we have Alan Chasney, the incumbent, going up for the United Workers' Party, also Gibeon Ferdinand for the St. Lucia Labour Party, and Melanie Freites, an independent. We're going to go over all of the candidates who are contesting this year's general election, as well as speak on some of the new sites and replacements across the island in terms of polling stations. So if you're not yet familiar, there is still time to go out and vote. You could go onto the website, check things out. So if you are now registered at a replacement site or new site, you can reroute and go cast your ballot there. We were talking before we went to the Prime Minister's word, and also to Herma, Mr. Bousquet and Mr. Samuel, on the impact, disadvantages and advantages of social media. Okay, we do have a clip of a report, but just want to wrap up the social media discussion. Disadvantages, advantages. I seem to think, you know, we're led by the perception. Should I say misperception, because there is no real figure for determining the impact of these lives and the campaign broadcasts. So you see 4,000 viewers, 4,000 persons watching. Are we being misled to think that this number of persons are even the electorate? They could very well be underage. You know, so speak to perhaps the misperception that the figures that we see on social media reacting to these posts and these videos and these lives, is it really worth anything when you count it down, when you whittle it down?
it's a very interesting development, but given the culture, we have a culture of a very competitive culture, and numbers is really the metric that we use to determine anything. And so the number of hits, the number of persons logged on and following a discussion live and so on is basically the kind of metric we're going to be looking at. But as you quite rightly said, given what we know about these things, the numbers can be inflated. We could have, just like these polls, certain people being asked to call or to vote and to kind of influence the outcome of the whatever metric. But I believe that while I call these noises, that's what we use in statistics, these are noises. Notwithstanding the substance, I think by and large, maybe you can discount by some level, 30, 10%, whatever is your comfort. But the broad message, I think, still holds that if it's up, it's up. If it's down, it's down. You're going to have, there's always room for manipulation, to use that word, by those who have a particular interest to skew it one way or another. But these platforms are here to stay. They're part of the reality. We are in an ICT revolution, and the critical thing about ICT is that it helps to overcome the spatial and time constraint, the constraint of time and distance. So, and also the audience is not limited by having to be within the space. They can be anywhere in the world and have input because of that digital connection. And as one of the legacies, or if you want to call it, one of the things that have been accelerated as part of normal life since COVID is the use of online and digital platforms for doing everything that we do. This ICT penetration, earlier on Earl was talking about cell phones and in St. Lucia being quite high for quite a while. So what is needed, and to go back to what you said earlier on, just was perhaps going forward as we mature, there might be some role for some kind of regulation. I don't know what form that will actually take, but to at least sort of promote a sort of a more responsible discourse and to suppress and discourage at least the thing that the minister, the representative for Microsoft North alluded to in terms of the sort of vitriolic, venomous exchanges that does not help, and to focus more on sort of a more mature discourse on points, on merits and so forth, on demerits of the points. But the fact it's the devil that we have with us, because it's not going to go away because we like it or don't like it. It's a question of what sort of systems we put in place to manage and to sort of discourage the fake news and the sort of, how we can put someone's head on a body, that type of thing, and all the creative, some of it is creative as well, output that we can see coming out of the use of this online digital platform. So it's one of the interesting developments of our election. Because of the protocols, the need to manage how we interact and not be too close, we have had to lean more heavily on that sort of way of getting the messaging out. And in a way, one has to say, I mean, things can go around so quickly. I mean, one WhatsApp message, and before you know it, the penetration is like a blast message, is gone and hit about 3,000-4,000 people in an instant. So certainly there are some positives, but we are the negative is, but we must be fully cognizant of all the negatives, the fake news, the sort of misinformation going out just as easily. Yes, and the fear that can cause some stampede behavior in terms of people, the fear, anxiety that can come out of anything if it's believed. So we need that regulation going forward.
Okay. But quickly on that, I think the genie is out of the bottle. And it is going to be impossible to now put that genie back in the bottle, since you see, in society today, rights and responsibilities do not go hand in hand, and there is a right. People have a right to spread fake news
irresponsibly.
Yeah, and therefore the battle between big tech and states in terms of trying to guide and ensure that users do not abuse it is impossible to do it, and therefore you are stuck with a situation where the majority would be engaging in responsible use, but the one that engages in irresponsible use opens up a can of worms that we tend to try to, put the lid on the pan quickly. But when these kind of worms come out, we need to look at why they came out and whether we really need to keep them locked in the pan or address the fact that once they get a chance, they will come out, because that's what responsible behavior is about. Everybody has a right, but every right has a responsibility, but we do not always recognize the responsibilities that come with the rights that we demand.
Okay, I want to now come to the aspect of politicians, candidates, and parties taking advantage, meaningful advantage of social media. So what we have seen in many political campaigns is a lot of the caricatures and light-hearted jokes and so on. But have the parties, have the candidates used this platform, seeing the reach that it can have, use this platform to convey policy, to convey intentions that would really transform the constituency? Have we seen that more specifically in this general election?
I'm not sure we have, because the candidates are people, and not all candidates are IT conscious persons. And the majority of candidates might be less IT conscious than we might think, in that we may see them and we may hear from them and get in touch with them, communicate with them through IT and social media, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is social media conscious. So that I think what we need to be able to do, the parties need to be able to do, is to integrate social media not as something that is a tool for use when we want to, but make it part of life. In the time when Hillary Clinton was running for the presidency of the United States against Barack Obama, at the time BlackBerry had just come out.
BBM.
Yeah, and it became mandatory for parliamentarians in the United States, Britain, and Canada to learn to use BlackBerry for communication. And it upgraded. In the UK, every MP had to learn to use email because you have a computer in front of you. This is the in thing. So I think that we need to be able to do that, take that sort of approach that doesn't see IT as an occasional something, but something that is part of life, part of the Internet of Things. I'll go back to the year 2000, why I remember it because that was my first year returning from Guyana, and there was a popular calypso because cell phones had just come out, Cable and Wireless and Digicel were fighting, and there was this calypso which reveals again what I said earlier about older persons, us having, it's called granny texting. And the calypso was about the guy, he bought a cell phone for his granny in Denry or Miku, so that whenever he goes to town, if she has a problem, she would, give him, send him a text. And this calypso was about, she would only text him and say, don't forget my KFC.
Let's stick a pin in that and just go to Petula. She is actually in the field right now. Ancillary, I don't want to forget about that social media conversation, but go back to Petula. Petula, you're in the field. Ancillary, am I correct?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your interviewee?
Hi, Jessica. We're at the pollen measures. We're at the Canaries polling station, the Canaries Practice School. And Mr. Metric was just going to give us a basic summary and update of what the atmosphere has been like today.
Okay. Okay, so go ahead, sir. Just give us an understanding of the atmosphere for the day so far.
Relatively, it's been quite good. My station is also, but generally, electors have been coming out. Kind of slow now, but we are expecting that pick up
Yeah. Okay, we seem to be having some audio issues there. We're going to go across to Chayla Mans from DBS covering Castries South and environs. Chayla? Hi, Chayla, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, fantastic. So right now, just to give a little bit of an update, we moved out from the south. We're actually back in Castries Central, to be exact, at the CSA Center. So just a stone's throw away for polling division E1, I can actually see, that we have the Common Rennie Memorial School. We still have people trickling in. It's not too heavy, but people are still flowing in. One of the last things we got just before we left from the south was that there was a little bit of issue in the Cicero area. We got that from Mr. Simon Seeley, who's actually heading or mobilizing the campaign for Mr. Johannes. And he was just saying that, persons in Cicero would come and they would be told the names were not there, but that was getting rectified. So now I'll just switch gears a little bit because we actually have Juliana Prosper right now, and she is the returning officer for Castries Central. So I have been looking forward for the entire day. We just came from Anglican Infant School, also past the Common Rennie. So finally we found her, and I thought it was really important, especially at this stage in the day, that we can hear from her, especially with what's going on, what they had to put together. We know there's added responsibilities during the pandemic into the mix. So I will bring Juliana over, that way we can have her chat more with the panel. So,
nice.
Yeah. Yes. Well, today is one of our very most important days in our history, and as I said prior, my job is just to oversee what is happening to ensure that everything runs smoothly, because the department electoral, the workers of electoral cannot be everywhere. So we are just representing them, and we have to represent them very well to ensure that everything runs smoothly and runs according to the law. The morning was very heavy at E1, which is right next to me, Common Rennie. I did all my round. The morning has been very heavy. But as you notice right now, coming back again, you notice it's trickling, but I'm thinking that later this afternoon, before closing of the vote, 6 o'clock, we will see a heavier flow of people. But so far, no incidents, except for once in a while you get the mining not on the voters list or somebody coming without an ID. But I think electoral has done a very good job in ensuring how we rectify that. So our job, or the job of the presiding officers and all those who are on the ground right now, is to ensure that nobody is turned away and everybody gets the right to exercise that little finger we put in the ink, so everybody can be proud to say, I voted today. So we are doing everything possible that every individual who comes to the different polling station will exercise that right.
Thank you for that, Chayla, and thank you for giving us that insight there from that constituency. We want to continue with a report from Petula over in Ancillary, and considering we had her on live, but we did have some technical difficulties, just go to this 2-minute report of her speaking to a returning officer on how things were going at that particular polling station.
Okay, we got some reports or complaints that there was a holdup between the surname's Peter Z, that started with Peter Z. Could you explain to us why?
Okay, well, as you know, I just arrived on the scene because I got similar complaints as well. So I have come here with one of my deputies to see how best we can address the situation. But I can tell you a couple of things off the bat. One is that with the observance of the COVID protocols, that definitely will slow down the process a bit. Okay, that is one factor. Secondly, this particular polling station that you're making reference to, or you've made reference to, is one with a large number of electors, almost 600. I have also been informed that you have a number of persons with various forms of incapacities. So all these are factors that may have contributed, to the slow pace at which the electors are allowed to cast their ballot. But I'm here nonetheless to see how best we can address it, because the intention is not to get anyone disenfranchised or frustrated to the point where they have to leave without casting their ballots. Okay?
Okay. Could you explain to us why were two stations merged with the P2Z?
Right. I am not sure it is. I'm in the P2Z that it actually happened, but this is something that I am currently investigating. I am not sure as to why two of them were merged. Okay. But as soon as I get information on that or clarification, then I can provide it. Actually, what I am not sure if it affects this one, like I said to you, but previously we had 6 stations here, and now it has been reduced to 5. Okay, so it may have been this one involved. I am not quite sure. So I cannot say for certain this is why it was done there, but I don't know why it was done. Eventually, I will find out, because that's what I'm trying to get investigated now, and I'll let you know.
Any consolation that you can provide to voters who are listening from this constituency that they will be able to cast their votes today?
Certainly. Like I said from the very beginning, I am here. We are going to try everything that is possible to ensure that everybody casts their ballot, by 6 o'clock, or if they are on the line by 6, they're still allowed to vote, even if it goes later into the night. But it is my commitment, my desire to see that every elector, that is registered to vote in this electoral district is given the opportunity to cast his or her ballot. So that's why I'm here to get this the process accelerated, so this can happen. So they can be rest assured that it will happen.
Okay, that was Petula out there in the field. Hopefully I could get some more information with respect to the specific polling station and the difficulties that were encountered there, so that we can do some following up, yeah? I now want to continue on with our broadcast with the presentation from Mr. Samuel, and it's on the trends of the general elections of past general elections, I should say, and just giving us some indication, if any, on what has transpired, based on what has transpired during this general election. Hand over to you, Mr. Samuel.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are following us on our broadcast on this very important day in our history and in our country's business as a democracy. For this presentation, I thought I would just put together some sort of a historical overview of elections in St. Lucia, and just to share a few tidbits with you, and little anecdotes and sort of things that we would want to know as we ensure that as a society we become a little more educated and informed about the journey that we have been on since we started back in 1951 when we attained adult suffrage. And of course, and end the presentation with a sort of an overview of what has happened across constituencies over the last, say, 5 elections thereabout. And I think that should give us a good idea of what has happened. As most of us know, and I hope our social studies teachers are teaching that it's important to know our own country's history. Sometimes with that balance is not always there. But we attained adult suffrage in St. Lucia in 1951 and had our first election on the 12th of October 1951. Later that year. Since then, as earlier indicated, we have had 17 general elections today being the 18th. But in terms of since independence, this is our 11th, and since we are using 17 constituencies, it's our 12th. So up until 1964, elections were held on a 3-year cycle basis, although 1961 was held in the 4th year and broke that cycle somewhat, the previous election being in 1957. Thereafter, in 1964, we changed to a 5-year cycle, of which we have been on since that time. So over the island, 70 years. So this year is our 70th year since we have attained this adult suffrage and the right which empowers every individual to exercise a vote to express their thoughts regarding how they believe the country should be governed and who should do so. Okay, so since that time we have had a number of political parties, the first one being the St. Lucia Labour Party, which remains one of the major parties in the country, at least on the basis of time, since being in a political party, its extensive support base and its election victories. The other major party being the United Workers' Party, which was established in 1964 via a merger with a party that predated it and known as the PPP. But the question is, why do we have this? And this is why do we have elections? An election is really the centerpiece of our democratic system. It's the way we empower every individual who subject to the criteria, of course, to exercise their right and via participation in a general election, which is a mechanism that we have for citizens to empower citizens to give voice to their views, to express their perspectives and their wish regarding who should govern, as I said, and the policy direction of the country. Having listened to a campaign where the various political parties would present the menu of options in terms of the directions that they hope to go into. We then, of course, based on our system of parliamentary democracy, where the country is divided into 17 constituencies or districts, parliamentary districts, we now populate what we call the parliament, and any group of persons, typically along party lines, but not necessarily along party lines, having a majority of support can form a government, and hence the term primus inter pares, the first among peers, and that person would be the leader, and we call the prime minister. As I said, we could break down our election history into maybe 3 sub-periods for comparative analysis. I would say 1951 to 1964, that first period, and then thereafter we have 64 to 79, and that concludes the pre-independence period, and thereafter we have the post-independence from 79 to the present. The post-independence period can be subdivided into what I call the pre-1997 period, which I think 1997 was a watershed year, a turning point for, if you like, when we saw the entrance of the Dr. Kenny Anthony era. The SLP won the first 4 general elections, which were held on the 3-year cycle between 1951 and 1964, and have won a total of 8 general elections so far. A number of them under the leadership of, well, they've had 3 leaders that have led them to victory. Sir George Charles leading in the first 4, and Sir Alan Louisy, the 1979, and Dr. Kenny Anthony, 3 elections from 1997, 2001, and 2011. The UWP, on the other hand, the other major party, has won a total of 9 elections to date, 8 of which were under the leadership of Sir John Compton. This includes 3 elections in the pre-independence period following the establishment of the UWP in 1964, and 4 between 1982 and 1992. But we must note that, as earlier on, 2 of these victories were basically in 1 year, in the same month. In 1987, April 6th, and then April 30th, we had another election, both with the same result, really. Election days, I want to just share a little tidbit. We have had election on every day of the week. Election has been chosen in terms of being called on whether it's Monday to Tuesday or right through to Friday. But Monday has been the most popular day on which elections have been held. 9 of our elections, interestingly, have been held on a Monday. Okay, 9 of them have been held on a Monday, once on a Tuesday, and the other day that has been a bit popular has been Friday, with Thursday being we've had only 3 elections on Thursday. But what I noted is from a certain point, almost all elections it became almost like a tradition. We don't have a fixed date for elections, but it almost seems that a tradition is emerging, that Mondays seem to be the preferred day, that successive governments have been, prime ministers have been choosing. What I don't know what drives that calculation as yet, but maybe the rest of the week. But so far, Monday has been emerging, and you could almost predict. And those who were looking to when this election would have been held, some of them actually factored that in looking at where it is likely to be. So that is the case. Monday it is, as is today. One of the perhaps most interesting statistics that a lot of pundits pay a lot of attention to regarding elections is that thing called turnout, voter turnout, which is an indication of the level of, if you like, as the representative from the OAS indicated, voter enthusiasm and participation. And it really would underscore the legitimacy of the winner, really, if you have a significant percentage of registered voters actually participating, and it means your democracy is alive and participatory. You do not want to have a democracy that's not participatory, and you have a lot of voter apathy and sort of disinterest as people lose trust and confidence in the system, and that is not very good. So far, I could say to you that since 1951 to the present elections, we have had generally good voter turnout, meaning above 50, and the highest year was, and I think it bears some kind of investigation because I was very surprised when I saw that number, 84.4% in 1974, and I take it under advisement, as they say, but and the lowest we have seen was in 1954 with 49.4%. On average, the voter turnout has generally been above 50%. In the 2016 election last year, it was at 53.4%. This is where we are. Another point I want to just draw to listeners' attention, those who would like to follow these things and can have little discussions after in the bars and in the post-election discourse, is we started out, when we first started having elections, with only 8 seats in our makeup. 8 seats, and between 1951 and 1964 there were only 8 seats, and we had something called a legislative council, and that has increased over time to now to 10 seats in 1960. Then we had 10 seats between 64 and 69, and then from 1974 we have had the system that we have with 17 seats, which by most indications is bursting as it seems in a number of areas, with the kind of, when you look at the disparity in size of some of the electoral districts, one many times bigger than some. We had that in Central Caches, Denry South being the smallest one, and we have very large ones such as Grosley. But I think the matter is under consideration. I think both parties have been looking at it. There was something that has gone before the Boundaries Commission, and I think a proposal to increase the number of electoral districts or divisions to 21, which I think is where the discussion, just like Dominica. Dominica has 21, although they are smaller in terms of population, but they do have a parliament with 21 seats in the House. I just want now to share with viewers just some broad overview of what we have observed in the last 5 elections so that we can kind of locate it. Most of us may not be able to cast our minds a lot before that in terms of our living experience. Over the last 5 elections, well, 3 of the last 5 were won by the St. Lucia Labour Party. And the period I'm looking at now is 1997 to 2016. In 1997, the St. Lucia Labour Party, basically, there was a major shift towards the St. Lucia Labour Party. There's a lot of enthusiasm. The voter turnout was 67%, and over 44,000 electors chose the St. Lucia Labour Party as compared to 26 to the other major party, the United Workers' Party. A disparity of over 18,000, a major shift. And the result, as you're aware, was a landslide of victory, the largest ever mandate given to a political party. That was 16-1. And that was the last. And after that, of course, we had another consecutive victory by the St. Lucia Labour Party in 2001 when the outcome was 14-3, 34,000 votes to the Labour Party compared to 23 for the United Workers' Party. Both parties sort of getting less voters, although over time the number of registered voters has increased progressively, has never waned. That stands to reason because population growth and new entrants and enrollment and so forth. Okay, so so that means we expect that in terms of consistency that it will be reflected in voter turnout, which will be a lot less, and it is indeed that way in 53%. A little bit of maybe voter apathy, indifference, something, but clearly they were not as excited in 2001 as they were in 1997. That turned around in the reverse way when that would have been the re-entrance into the political arena of former what is called former greater patriarch, at least of the United Workers' Party, Sir John, what they call it, the last hurrah, when he came in, and they won in 2006 and 11-6. United Workers' Party, but it was still a close fight, I must tell you, notwithstanding. It was 39,000 to 37,000, only a spread of about some 2,000 votes in favor of the United Workers' Party, and a margin of about some 10%. An interesting development is since that point, every election so far has had the same result. It has just been a revolving door as to who gets it. So if we have to go on trend, I don't know, we are likely to see is 11-6 in 2006 in favor of the United Workers' Party. Then in 2011, 11-6 in favor of the St. Lucia Labour Party. So the same result, just flipping around in the parliament. And in 2016, the St. Lucia Labour Party, United Workers' Party came in again, got 46,000 of the votes compared to 37 for the Labour Party, some 9,000 in favor of the United Workers' Party, and the same result. If we were to extrapolate, then the trend, what this suggests is that the Labour Party would come in maybe for 11-6, the same pattern. I don't want that to be used out there, but I'm just talking about the trends we're seeing in the data. Mm-hmm. Quite interesting result, 11-6 on 3 occasions. Just another quick tidbit for our young listeners especially. As you would know, we have 17 districts, and each district is made up of subdivided in a number of polling divisions in sub-order, some letter, an alphabet. So in Grosley it's A, Barbano B, Cashers North C, Cashers East D, etc. down to Miku South is M, and Miku North N, etc. And then you have A1, A2, A3, and sometimes that's further subdivided. But the total number of polling divisions is over 85 polling divisions in St. Lucia at the moment. And as the population increases, there might be the need to further subdivide some of these polling divisions into, like you have in Grosley, 2A and 2B, etc. Just by way of summary, in terms of results, we have had 974, 10-7 in favor of UWP, 979, the year of independence, 5-12 in favor of the Labour Party, 14-3, that's it. We have had that result twice. So the first time was 982 in favor of the United Workers' Party, and the peculiar result of 987, 9898 in favor of the United Workers' Party. We have had, 1992 was a year of difference. It's the only year where a third party actually registered a victory and had a seat in our parliament. And that was the PLP, the Progressive Labour Party, And so I think that would have been John Stanley Odlum won the seat of Castries South in 1992. As you're aware, since then we have had many third parties, we like to call them, or other non-major political parties, of which there are a few taking part in this election, couple, and so far only one of these have had a seat. Independents have won before, but not a third party. Okay, just I wanted to share that with you. Enrollment of new voters is one of the another interesting statistic that one needs to pay attention to. It gives you a sense of patterns of settlement, which constituencies are growing, and so on. We have seen over the last 3 election cycles that there's been steady increase in enrollment and by extension registration across all the constituencies, but some of course are growing faster than others. Okay, but the average is about 7% increase across in terms of percentage increase across the constituencies. That will be mainly our young voters and new entrants. Okay, I can come back later.
Yeah, definitely. We're going just sticking a pin in your presentation, just to bring some of the sights and scenes of the Castries North, Grosselet South, and Castries East constituencies voting, going to cast their ballots at the various locations. But we will come back to the presentation of Mr. Thomas Samuel, political analyst, giving us there quite a bit of information looking back on the general elections here in St. Lucia. We definitely have a few questions for you as well. So stay tuned for that. This is Decision 2021 St. Lucia. We invite you to go onto the website sluelectoral.com to just go read up, look up some of the information that Mr. Samuel has spoken about. You could get a greater understanding of the process, procedures involved. And if you haven't decided to vote as yet, you're still home, there is still time. The general election is in full swing. You can go onto that website and find out, type in your name simply. You don't even need, if you're not sure of your division, your constituency, you could just simply type in your name and you will find out, if you are registered to vote, where you can vote today. In the meantime, some of the sights and scenes of the Castries North, Grosselet South, and Castries East polling stations.
James Mark, from Villebouteille, Castries Comprehensive School, which is the polling station I voted at.
Okay, so tell me, what has your experience been so far this morning in terms of the lines, waiting, the weather, etc.?
Well, the line was long, but to me everything goes smooth. Everything is going smooth, as you know. Everything is well coordinated. You understand? I didn't have any problem. Okay. You understand? I didn't have any problem whatsoever.
Okay, so you were determined to come out to vote this morning, come rain or shine?
Rain or shine. I was out from 5:30. I was already on the line.
Okay, wow. So what is motivating you coming out to cast your ballot today? Is it, for some people, it might be, the way COVID-19 was handled, the economy, hope for your children, education sector, like I said, the pandemic, or is it just loyalty to party?
No, it's not loyalty to party. It's the economy, the future of my kids, and stuff like that. Due to COVID-19 also, the handling of COVID-19. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good day. Tell me your full name, please.
Vera Ann Alexander.
Okay. And tell me what constituency you're voting in, more specifically the polling station today.
I'm voting for Castries North.
You're voting in the Castries North area?
Yes.
Okay, so you're at the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School today. Tell us what the experience was like today, taking into consideration the weather and the lines.
Well, once we got into the school, right, and we were covered, we didn't get wet or anything like that. And the process went quite fast, right? Whilst the lines were long, but it went fast.
Okay, wonderful. I'm not going to ask you what party you voted for or who you voted for, but what motivated you coming out today to cast your ballot? Was it loyalty to party? Was it education? Was it a hope for the economy? Is it because of COVID? What motivated you coming out today?
My country. I want to see the best for St. Lucia, right? And that's why I came out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tell me your full name and the constituency you're voting at, more specifically the polling station.
Luke Isidore, and I'm voting Castries North, and polling station A to Z.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is at the Union Zoo.
Union Zoo, yes.
Okay, so tell us what your experience has been so far. This is a new polling station.
Yes, it is.
How have things been going since 5 o'clock this morning?
Well, I actually got here roughly about 6:15, and it was a bit slow process because they started at 6:30 compared to the normal 6 a.m. And for me, it was kind of all right. You know, people have been coming in slowly but surely, and the process went smooth as usual. And I think we just have to wait for the results.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
If you could just speak to us about what motivated you coming out this early in the morning. Some people more dead set on coming out in the afternoon, later on in the day. What is motivating you this morning? Come rain or shine, because we saw the morning start with some inclement weather. Was it education? Was it the economy? Was it the COVID-19 management? What made you come out here? Was it loyalty to political party?
To be honest, I have no loyalty to political party. I am for country, and I want to see change and reform in my country when it comes to the constitution, when it comes to how country's monies are spent, also my kids' future, education-wise, and seeing this country on a pinnacle in terms of economic rebuild and reform. And this is why I came out, because we need strong leaders, people who are consistent with our finances, with our tax monies, and we need that sort of governance, good governance in St. Lucia. And this is why I came out, vote for change, and to create this, what you call this, effectiveness in elections as an individual and as a true St. Lucian.
Okay.
Yes.
Now coming back to the polling station, the Union Zoo being a new polling station, has it been more convenient for you? Where was the last polling station for you?
The last polling station was at the Castries Comprehensive, and unfortunately I was number 9, and this time around I was number 25. So it's more convenient for me, much closer, because this is where I'm from. This is my community, this is where I was brought up. So more convenient and more better in terms of access.
Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Our next stop in our polling day pursuits this morning is the Corinth Secondary School, a polling station within the Gros Islet constituency. We can see the line for the electors stretching as far as a quarter mile into the community, reaching as far as the J.H. Larches Electric's establishment within the community. Persons are coming out in droves to cast their ballots this morning, and the indication that we're getting is that it's no different to what obtained an hour ago, an hour before that. So we're hearing now from the electors what they have to say in terms of the experience that they have been having so far for the morning.
Hi, my name is Joshua Tulo, and I voted for Corinth School A4.
Okay, so tell me what your experience was this morning waiting in line. We saw that the Corinth Secondary School polling station line has been very long. Was it long when you joined?
Yeah, it was really long. It actually started like probably a good half a mile down, right at the back next to the bar over there. And my mother called me at 5 o'clock, but we reached around like 6 o'clock. So we didn't expect the line to be that long.
Okay.
For that time.
So voting as a young person, you were not deterred by the long line, nor the inclement weather. I see you have your umbrella with you. Tell us what was important to you. Why it was important to you to come out to vote today?
Well, I feel like, I'm turning 24 this month. So I felt like I needed to at least put in my part, because I've been concerned about St. Lucia and my island, and I find it's very important to at least play your part. If you're going to talk about the things you're concerned about, you might as well put into the action, and that's how I feel.
So what are some of the things that strike a chord for you? Is it what is being done in education, the economy, how the government has been managing COVID-19 so far?
Yeah, I find it's very important to look on based on how they manage COVID and what things they put first before the people, So I find it's very important that when there's stuff laid down for COVID and people and the island, I think it's important to cater for people. I think that's a very first thing. That's the first thing you look at when you talk about stuff like COVID. This is like a huge crisis, right? And people are infected. So you need to think about the things you put in place for people. And we have our school economy, we have everything there. But when it comes to like crisis and the healthcare and all of these things and compensation and businesses, people losing businesses, people losing jobs, that's very important to me.
Thank you very much.
I've been waiting in line this morning for 2 to 3 hours to cast my vote where necessary. And I'm feeling so proud that I waited impatiently. And I'm feeling so good about myself. And so good about what will occur finally this evening.
Okay. Yeah. So the rain, wind, rain, sun, that won't keep you up.
It could be hurricane, it could be tornado, I would have been here. So I'm proud to say that I'm happy that I made up this decision to come in to support my party.
Okay. So tell me, the COVID-19, let's come a bit further. So the COVID-19 situation, tell us your experience so far on the queue, the line there this morning. Did you see the COVID-19 protocols being observed? I see you have your mask, you're making sure you protect yourself.
Well, the people are certain with their masks, but distancing, we were so close that we could have, the closeness is not affecting us.
Okay, yeah. Okay, no problem. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well,
in terms of your voting experience?
I'm feeling relieved, like I said, and I know that the party I voted will be an incumbent party.
Thank you very much. So we are now at a quieter polling station. It is a new polling station for the 2021 edition of the general elections. The St. Mary's College Auditorium is a polling station catering to the VG residents of the VG Peninsula. And as I indicated, not much is happening here. The electors are coming in, trickling in really, 1 by 1, 2 by 2. And so far we've heard from the officials that things are going very quietly since the start of the day, the voting day, and we do expect that to continue considering such a small number of persons, such a small electorate being catered to here. We did find time to speak to one voter about to go in to cast his ballot. So just tell us what your experience has been so far since you've arrived, as compared to, taking things in a COVID-19 context, as compared to previous elections.
Well, this is obviously far less people. I mean, I normally have voted at the Castries Comprehensive School, which is well organized, I have to say, but this is like very, very few people. So it's much easier.
Okay. Where do you place 2021 as compared to 2011, 2006, previous elections?
In terms of how
just
critical
your general observations, feelings about the pulse of the people.
Well, there's definitely a pulse. The question is, which way is the pulse going? So it's a critical election, there's no doubt about it. So I'm expecting that we're going to have a lot of excitement tonight when the results start coming out.
Okay. What is motivating your decision going to cast your ballot? Is it the handling of COVID-19, the management, the economy? Where is your focus at in terms of being determined to come here today?
That's a very leading question. There are all sorts of issues. I mean, obviously, you have to consider everything that has happened in the last 5 years. COVID-19 has not made it easier for anybody. But there are a number of issues that people will either agree with or they don't agree with. So I am motivated by the good of the country, purely and simply the good of the country.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, our polling day coverage continues here at the Patricia James Secondary School, formerly known as the Vidbutei Secondary School, catering to more residents of the Castries North constituency. And these are the communities they're catering to: Carriere, Lance Road East, La Clary, Vidbutei, York Hill, Active Hill, La Panse, that is the upper part, and Carabel Gardens. Now, we've been hearing so far that it has been very smooth, a very hassle-free voting experience this morning. And while initially the line did curl up onto the court in the community, it is now relegated to the secondary school only, and persons are able to come in, as I indicated, very hassle-free experience for the electorate coming in to cast their ballots at this location. We now hear from some of the individuals who were able to vote here very effortlessly. So tell us, what was your experience like coming out this morning to cast your ballot?
Well, the party which I'm voting for yesterday to make sure that they had the advantage. So definitely had to come, whether I wanted or not.
Come rain or shine?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So what is the experience on the queue? What did the line look like when you just arrived, and what time did you come through?
Well, when I arrived on the line, I found there was a lot of people, but the line is moving very fast.
Okay.
Yeah, very fast.
So are you vaccinated against COVID-19?
Not at all.
Okay, but you took up other precautions, yeah?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
My name is Annie.
And okay, so tell me, what was your experience this morning getting on the line, queuing up to go cast your ballot?
Well, I find it was good and fast, very fast.
Okay.
Because I myself say I had to go back in town, and when I reach here, I say, oh wow. So when I asked the lady, she told me, come, she find my name for me, she told me, follow me, and I went in. Very good.
Okay, so you feel relieved that
I feel relieved. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So in terms of COVID-19, you had to get on a line. Are you fully vaccinated against the virus?
Well, I find it's good. It's good.
Did you get vaccinated?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, but you did take every other precaution. I see you have your mask on.
Very. I have double again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and kudos.
I appreciate what they're doing there. It's good. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yes.
So tell me your full name?
Paulina Castan.
Okay, so tell me, what is your experience this morning at this constituency, at this polling station?
Well, the people were straightforward. The police officers were very friendly. They gave us some correct instructions, and everything went smoothly. I didn't stay on the line too long.
Okay.
Maybe about 5 minutes. That wasn't too long. Wow. No, that wasn't too long. And the process overall was very easy.
Okay.
Yes.
So you feel satisfied about the voting experience overall? And what time you came in this morning?
I came in for, I don't want to lie, I came in for 9:30.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said 5 minutes, so 9:35 you're out. Okay. So how do you feel about being able to get this off your chest?
Oh, I could not even sleep. I was up since 5 o'clock. I just wanted to get over. I just wanted to be done and just call it judge and go to work. So I feel great.
So you calling late?
No, I still early.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Janova Valse, and I voted at the Bocage Secondary School.
What was your experience like this morning?
It was a very long process, but I didn't mind because I was all excited in casting my votes, and I was also there to help other persons to make sure that they cast their votes that are all right, and I was very happy to do so.
Okay. How long have you been waiting? You indicated it was a long process. How did...
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
And did the inclement weather affect you at all?
Well, I wasn't paying attention to that because I wanted to vote. I had my umbrella. I had all my gears ready for the weather because I was determined to vote.
Okay. Now that you have done that, a great relief, yeah?
Yes, but I'm still helping other persons who may not have transportation to go and vote. I am there to make sure that they cast their vote, the right to vote.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. And how are you feeling now that you've been able to do this? I know many persons have been waiting since the Prime Minister made the announcement that the general elections would have been held today. Do you feel a sense of relief? How do you feel?
I am still excited, but after the results, then everything will be fine.
Thank you. You're welcome.
My name is Ken Edwin.
Okay, and where did you vote today? What polling station?
Enchipo Secondary School.
Okay. What has your voting experience been like this morning? What time did you come in and how long did you have to wait before casting your ballot?
Well, I came at about, let's say, 8:15, and it's now, right, 11:15. So that's like this 3 hours just waiting online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're getting word that some persons come in quickly and leave, in no time really. So I guess it would have to be your name on the ballot list.
Well, I believe that what is because certain depends on how common your first initial name is.
Okay.
And you see other lines like JK, there are basically no one coming in the line. So I guess that's what is really is. There's a basis on how many people that have to be actually have the letter there.
Okay. Now you seem relatively young. Is this your first time casting a ballot?
Yes, this is my first time. I'm only 22 years old, despite the height and everything.
Okay, how did it feel to be able to vote for the first time, especially in a post-COVID world? What really motivated you, in addition to you having to come out here for the first time since turning 18?
For my first experience, I feel it was a little overhyped because you really just come just with those, but it's not really about just actually the process of putting your X, is the outcome of what you actually do. And the decision you make affects how your future. And as a young adult growing up in St. Lucia, I feel like that I actually have to make decisions to actually influence how my future will be, how for my kids and all stuff.
Okay.
So yeah. And I also feel as you say post-COVID, I feel like that could have been because something could be implemented to make it at least online or some way of electronic way, so we could just a means of just voting online maybe, or mailing your ballots, or some other sort of the traditional come in, dip your finger and put an X and have to wait on online. Amongst other people, we don't know. Yeah. Although the protocols were upheld, I will agree that were exceptionally well. But yeah, I feel like as technology ages and the world changes and everything changes, I feel like we could have done something different than just the ordinary traditional put your X and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, would you encourage other young persons like yourself to vote? If you could just give a word of encouragement, because we're airing this afternoon.
I would say the thing is, most young people don't really pay attention to what's going on around them. So I feel like the first step is to pay attention. So you could make an information that say, oh, my parents is XYZ, so I vote in XYZ. So I would encourage you to vote. It does, no matter what you think, it does make a difference. It actually impacts what you do, because who you put in power does actually make a difference for what you do. So yeah.
Thank you so very
You're
much.
welcome.
Appreciate it. So tell me your full name and your candidacy. Speak to us about your candidacy.
My name is Ubaidullah Mohammed, and I'm representing the Cassius East constituency. Specifically, I was born in Bocage, so therefore my constituency comprises of Bocage, Enchipo, Marchand. If you could see the hill and the valley. So therefore, I'm here representing my people.
Okay, so just tell us about this morning's experience. You did not vote at the entry post-secondary school here. Tell us where you cast your ballot.
I casted my ballot at the Bocage Secondary School, and it's not a lot. Again, many people are frustrated when I went there because the lines they don't know where to go, and that's a problem. Although I see it's a big school, they could put different letters from, for example, N to whatever on one block. You have about everyone voting in one block, and that created a little problem. People have been on the line from 6 in the morning, and they're on the line at 8, and they're on the wrong line, and that's elderly people. So I think we can make a difference here. For example, just like this, there are 4 lines there. They could use each block for different set of letters. So it could be easier for the elderly, even for those who use wheelchairs. It's difficult for them to have access to go and vote, and that need to change. There's, for example, somewhere need to just be allocated in those schools for the elderly themselves, and get a proper treatment rolling.
So that was the word from the third candidate of the party NGP. They're speaking from the Castries East constituency His hat is in the ring, along with Fortuna Belrose and Philip J. Pierre, the incumbent, that is UWP and SLP respectively, for in their bid for securing a seat in Parliament. We continue. Well, those were just the sights and scenes, as I indicated, of Broseley South. So we toured the Corinth Secondary School, and we also visited polling stations in the Castries North constituency, also polling stations in the Castries East constituency. And you saw, in terms of Castries North there, the St. Mary's College Auditorium being a polling station, a new one at that. Also the zoo in Union, that's Armandale. It's a new one as well. And we had Vidbute, the Patricia James Secondary School, and also in Castries East, the Bocage Secondary School, and the Interpol Secondary School as well. In terms of Castries East, we also had the police barracks. Tents were set up there. Unfortunately, there was very little that we could film given the space and the way things were configured on the ground. But persons there were also going to cast their ballots at the police barracks location. We continue with our presentation with the continuation. Okay, before we come back to your presentation, Mr. Samuel, I just want to get some weigh-in from you, Mr. Bousquet, on some of the feedback, the reactions, the feelings, the sentiments on the ground from some of these individuals in the three constituencies.
Well, I think the constant observation is about slow voting, and I wouldn't put much to that, because it is a historical tendency that voting is slow on mornings and it picks up in the afternoon between 4 and 6. That is normal, but this is the new normal. And you also have the effect of weather. That is an up and down question, because you did hear from some people that, you know, rain or shine, they will cast their ballot. I would generally think that everybody who wants to vote made an effort to go out to vote. When I went to vote this morning very early, you had the usual presence of elderly persons needing assistance being among the earliest to vote. The numbers were small in the beginning everywhere, but they're likely to pick up towards the end. But generally, I think one should not lose hope. Of course, in every election, what you have is an inability to determine the stay-home factor. How many people are going to vote? How many people are going to stay home? That is always decided by how people feel on the day of voting, whether they feel they'd be wasting their time, or whether they feel that they're not satisfied with any of the candidates in their area, or whether they just feel like some people with regard to COVID, that, you know, voting is not for them. In the same way that I don't prescribe and encourage people to make their minds up as to whether to take the jab or not. Similarly, I will only encourage people to vote, but not tell them who to vote for.
Of course.
I would say, go and vote, cast your vote. I would do my best to prevent you from not exercising that right to vote. But it is the inalienable right of everybody to choose how they vote and who they will vote for, and all and every efforts to influence how people vote is incorrect, illegal, unconstitutional, on paper, but elections are about influencing voters to vote for your manifesto, your policy, your party. So it's one of those things that yes, you're not supposed to, but it's all about being able to influence people. When one applies that to other efforts to influence, whether monetary, persuasion, or other forms, it is generally allowed, it is generally accepted that a candidate will do and say the things to get your vote. But one of the things that is absolutely important in my view, I didn't finish making the point that I think that elderly persons need to be able to, like the old lady, to text. If she could have texted in 2000, people her age in 2021, I know, can do much more with a phone. And similarly, when it comes to the value of the vote, the importance of the vote to the person, I think we need to have, from an institutional entity like the electoral department, it shouldn't be left to the parties. There should be, the electoral department is not supposed to sleep between elections. Of course, it remains open to do what needs to be done, but I think electoral departments in this time need to do much more. They need to have their voter education campaigns need to be more about educating the voter about why he or she should vote. You know, because in other countries, there were wars for the right to vote. Blood was shed. I'm not sure blood was shed in our instance, but like the gentleman was pointing out, in 1951, it took 100 years after emancipation and the end of slavery. In 1938, the conditions were still so bad that workers and the majority people in all of the British West Indian territories went on strike in 1938 and created what Sir Arthur Lewis described as a revolution in his seminal work, Labor in the West Indies, written in 1939. Coming out of those 1938 struggles across the Caribbean, the Moyne Commission made recommendations, and one of the recommendations coming out of the Moyne Commission's recommendations was for recognition of trade unions. And since trade unions were now legal, the trade unions now became the ones agitating for political rights. So the trade unions established labor parties, so that in 1950, the St. Lucia Labour Party was established by the St. Lucia Workers' Union and the Seamen and Waterfront Workers' Union. And in all other Caribbean territories, it is the unions that establish the parties. But another bit of constitutional reform from the Moyne Commission was to allow people to qualify to vote in their own countries. Because up until 1950, to vote in St. Lucia, you had to own property. You had to own the land or the house. You had to own property. That was a qualification for voting. So until it was only in 1951 that everybody above 21, you know, could exercise their right to vote. It was called a perfumed name, adult suffrage, but it was really the right to vote. So coming from 51, as the gentleman was pointing out, Mr. Samuel was pointing out, you had a series of elections every 3 years. Participation was up and down. The first one was high, the second one was low. In 1951, you had 7 seats, but you had 9 independent candidates.
Yes.
You know, in 1954, the number of the turnout was much lower than in 1951.
Yes.
So what we have is a continuity that takes us to the point I wanted to, I don't know if I could react to.
Sure, certainly.
A point he made about the 11-6 trend. It's something that I've been writing about for the past year. Whether it is a trend which I believe it is a trend, it has happened 3 times in 15 years, that is the result, where you have regime change after 5 years. But the interesting one about St. Lucia, what I consider to be scientific about it, is that, like he said, 3 consecutive 11 sixes, where the electorate is ensuring that first of all, that a party only gets 5 years to implement its manifesto. And if it is not considered to have done that, it is changed. But from 2006 to 2016, what you had was every election result returning an 11-6 majority to each ruling party. Now, happening 3 times in 15 years, some of us say it's a trend, and therefore it can likely happen again. If it has happened 3 times, why not a 4th time? The counter argument to that is that it is not a trend, it is three coincidences. And therefore, maybe if it happens a 4th time, it can be called a trend. But irrespective of what position we take, I think that St. Lucia is the only country in the world where you have had that type of return. And I would like for the political scientists to look into it, go into the figures, and to be able to tell the rest of the world whether St. Lucians have discovered a formula on how to handle.
Do you think it's more than just a coincidence?
I think it's more than just a coincidence. I think that the fact that the same thing has happened 3 times. Now I do not say that I have the ability to go into the figures. I was better at English than maths at school. But I think it is something worth looking into. These coincidences don't happen 3 times. A coincidence is coincidence, couple. Something happened twice, like the lightning striking twice is a coincidence. But for 3 times, let's see if a 4th will make it a coincidence, or it just gonna have a break in the trend.
Okay, we now have some aerial shots coming from, if my producers, Davina, Alyssa, or Director Glenn could just remind me of the individual who submitted that footage, coming from Christopher Kessel. Yes, Christopher Kessel submitting that information, that data to us from DBS. Some drone shots from the polling station in Grosselet. That's at the Grosselet Infant and Primary School. So voting is still continuing, St. Lucia. If you are still at home or you're mulling about whether or not you should head on out, if you registered to vote, you have your ID card, you have a way to identify yourself, you can head on over to your your specific polling station and cast your ballot. So at this time, with what we're seeing on the ground still happening, just a gentle reminder that St. Lucia is continuing to make its decision for 2021, what will guide a contest of sorts for the seats in the Parliament. We only meant to punctuate the presentation of our political analyst, Mr. Thomas Samuel, but we seem to have gorged through. Hopefully our viewers have retained the information you presented earlier, and I now allow you to continue so we can continue just taking things up. I know Mr. Bousquet did ask you a few questions. I have a few myself, but when we get to the end of your presentation, go ahead.
Well, thank you indeed, Jesse. Some very interesting points I think I would have liked to have also joined Mr. Bousquet in as he reflected on the Caribbean story, really, on the importance of elections, and talking about the conditions in the islands that led to that point of empowerment, I think, in the 1950s. The whole Moyne Commission, when Lord Moyne was sent to the region to investigate the conditions after a set of riots that took place, starting in Jamaica and going for the islands, and so on. And the recommendations, as he indicated, that led to this establishment of worker representative organizations that we now call trade unions, and which then became the starting point for a lot of the labor parties, which are across the space, and so on. But I think the other issue that I wanted to draw some attention to, and some of it came out in the comments made by the young man, some of the persons that were interviewed on site, and some of the locations, is the whole question of why are you voting and what has motivated you, and that we have to, and I think something was said about the electoral office in the interregnum between elections, using some of that time to get into some education on voting. But I think as an independent country, one of the things we should be looking at is that's how you empower citizens. The whole idea of promoting in their mind civic responsibility, and to treat voting as a sort of civic responsibility. Because when you look at how we achieve that, right, and some of us trivialize it and don't seem to relate to it or think of it as anything very important, it's something that it means we have dropped the ball. Either the Ministry of Education, they need to have it in the curriculum, and either primary schools to teach young children, or secondary school social studies perhaps, letting people understand what is empowerment, how are you empowered to influence a change. Be the change you want to see in the world through your actions. If not, you just give up the voice that has been given to you. You become voiceless, and we want to empower you to have a voice. That, I think, would help people pay a little more attention to the discourse, and it'll elevate, and it'll be a win-win. All boats in the harbor, so to speak. The tide will rise in terms of the quality of national discourse. When I listen to a lot of what happens, I realize the gulf in misinformation, the gulf in lack of understanding of a lot of things. And sometimes the lack of understanding causes people to be turned off and just did broad brush and say all of that is the same, and just, to use our local term, it's like 6 1/2 dozen, it doesn't really matter, and they just generalize across. And the other thing is, like, in the earlier, before, there was a clear distinction, I would like to say, a clearer distinction between the sort of philosophical orientation, political orientation of one, say, a party that had the name Labour in it, had a certain orientation that conjures something in the minds of persons, that they had a certain orientation on how, in terms of their policies, where it was the bent, if you like, on their policies about empowerment of workers and, individual rights and so forth. And then you have what we might call the sort of more conservative parties that had a different connotation in the minds of people. I think what has happened over time is that the two groups seem to have they've either moved closer to each other and become less distinguishable, almost like they blended, and with all the movement, you can't really clearly delineate where they inhabit in terms of the spectrum of political, thought on issues. So it's like, when I was growing up at school, it just like we had these alternative paths that countries can decide to go down, whether you were on this side of the spectrum or on that side of the spectrum, market oriented or more interventionist posture on the part of government, that type of thing. But now what we have, it seems, and it causes people not to see the difference philosophically. What is the political orientation? Now it seems to be expediency. It's like what seemed to work. And they're all over the shop on as far as that, and it's lost what they really are about. And that's now, at least you have something like the Green Party, the new parties that have a particular, they're clear in terms of at least what they oriented towards in their view of the world, and sort of sustainable development, coexisting, man existing with nature, sort of balanced approach, to development that takes account of the environment and that type of thing. So these are some of the issues I think that needs to have further discussion in the public domain, looking at political parties, because right now what we're seeing is like, and that's not for St. Lucia, mind you, this is not a St. Lucian situation, it's across the region. So I find that very interesting. Should I
absolutely
segue back into this? What I wanted to share with listeners and viewers at this time really was some broad indication of what we have seen at the constituency level. But before I do that, I just want to say that the region has had a number of elections in this COVID environment. At least there are 5 or 6 of them. We have had St. Kitts Nevis had its election on the 5th of June, and the incumbent, which is a coalition of the PAM, CCM, and PLP, not the same progressive, but People's Labour Party, won what is a 11-seat majority in the St. Kitts Parliament. Mm-hmm. In Guyana, there was also an election just in that month of March last year, 2020, when COVID became topical in the news in earnest. There was an election on the 2nd of March, and the opposition, PPPC, led by Irfin Ali, won some 33 seats, a slight majority, I think is a 1-seat majority in the 65-seat parliament, defeating Brigadier General Granger. And it took us quite a while before that situation was fully determined, and down there we had the CARICOM observers and other international bodies. I think the CCJ was brought into the mix as well. So that was quite a contentious one that we had. Our next door neighbor, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they too had an election last year, November 5th. And that was another election in the COVID environment. Again, the incumbent won. Voter turnout was actually quite high. It was at 66.9%, and there was a slight swing away from the incumbent nonetheless of some 2.9%. The Unity Labour has been in office there for some time, and the New Democratic Party, NDP, got 6 seats, and the Raul Gonzalez Party got 9 seats. Trinidad, another CARICOM territory that had an election in the midst of COVID, had theirs on August 10th. And again, the incumbent won 22 of the 41 seats. There, Dr. Rowley, being the Prime Minister there, and the UNC, led by Kamala Basasa, had won 19 seats. Still in the Caribbean, we had Jamaica. Jamaica had an election as well, but the trend was different there. Voter turnout was relatively low at some 32.8%. But that election was also held in September, on the 3rd of September to be precise, and the incumbent JLP, led by Prime Minister Andrew Holness, won what is an increased majority amidst a low voter turnout, but gaining some 17 more seats to a total of 49 seats, while the PNP lost ground in the parliament and retained only some 14 seats. So here you are, some cross-section of elections that were held in the region, and St. Lucia being another one in our region. So I thought I would share that with you. If you like, we can look at what has happened in terms of constituencies. Starting off in Gros-Islet. Gros-Islet, over the last 5 elections, has been represented by the St. Lucia Labour Party in 1997 and 2001, and thereafter in 3 times out of 5 times. In 2006, the St. Lucia Labour Party, United Workers' Party won some 5,000 plus votes over the 4,000 of the Labour to win the seat in 2000. That was Leonard Spider-Montut, and only to change again with Miss Emma Hippolyte winning in 2011. She got some 5,242 votes. So you could see the back and forth. Now, the point I really want to make about this is the issue of stability. This is something that is you can't, well, the voters are always right. Let's put it that way. Voters are never wrong. Whatever they choose is sovereign. But just from an analytical standpoint, there are issues with this back and forth for government in terms of planning. What sort of planning horizon can you have? And given the time it takes to roll out any serious plans, 5 years is in fact a very narrow, very limited period. So it's a question of whether we find ways to have binding obligations across parties, whether they come in, whoever gets in the reign, so that some of these hardcore big issues can be dealt with regardless of who is actually in the seat of government. Because it is very costly, and that is something that we need to understand. When we change governments, yes, it's the right, but we must think of it, we must be prepared to accept as well what that means. As I said, the people's collective voice is sovereign. We're not here to question the rightness or wrongness of it. We're just saying here, issue of stability, planning, and what that means for management. So while governments can change, but if we can find ways to cause governments, when they come in, to have to, I say, deal with these big ticket issues that either we do it for a referendum or whatever way to say these are the 5 things or 4 things or things that we think that governments or our government should be looking at, and so when they come in we don't have, you know, this wastage and stoppage and revisiting, and it's like try to turn a big tanker on a dime. It's a difficult thing to do. It has, that turn will take you a while. It can't turn on a dime. And as a small state, that's the thing, as a small country, the effort, the planning, the resources that are involved in some, especially big ticket items, we have to look carefully at this in terms of what that means. I believe as the society is mature, maybe we might see different ways. Another thing that can be helped if we reform, can help us going forward, sorry, if we have central government and then we have local government, so sort of a bit more decoupled, and local government can deal with some of the sort of more parochial, more local issues, and the larger big issues at the central government can be handled different. So we need to find some formulations, that's my point, that allows us to have stability while people exercise their choice. So that's the main point I wanted to I'll stop here and I'll get back to the presentation and
okay.
Go forward.
We're getting the reports in, so unfortunately we must step in on that presentation. We just want to remind you, the general public, that we are covering for the general elections. We're covering the general elections from this morning, I believe, since 5:30 a.m. And we had this morning Timothy Polion, also Lisa Joseph, and Primus Hutchinson. And this afternoon, you have the political analyst in the person of Mr. Samuels. We have Mr. Bousquet and myself, Jessie Leonce, joining you for the afternoon to keep you while you are out and about casting your ballot. Out in the field now, we have Ms. Sheila Menz. Of course, if you've been following us from morning, you would know that we have collaborated with DBS. So Sheila from the DBS has been covering the Castries South and also Castries Central locations, and she has an interview with representative candidate, from the NGP party. So let's take a look at what he has to say. Mr. Aaron Alexander, good day to you both.
All right, good afternoon, Jessie. Good afternoon again to the panel. So Aaron is behind me. We just saw a minor accident, so he just went to assist the person. In the meantime, let me just give you a quick update. We're literally outside of the RC Boys School. Things are definitely a lot calmer right now for Castries Central. And what we're seeing is that people are still trickling to vote. But there is a little bit of confusion. Like I said, a motorcyclist, ironically again, was the one to, be at the scene. But keeping in with what's happening right now, we have Aaron coming back, and of course he's the representative going up. That's not a problem, and he's apologizing, but you know what? He was doing something good. It was totally random, unexpected to see a biker fall, and we obviously know of the accident earlier today, not too far on the chaussee, and still part of the area that he's representing. Now, of course, we do know one of the mandates from the Green Party was also, basically not to follow what we traditionally know from elections. So I think it's going to be very exciting now that we do have the NGP rep right here, Aaron, for Castries Central. So I will hand him over to you. On the panel, we have Jessie Leonce.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Aaron Alexander here. I'm Kendo's candidate for the NGP, Castries Central constituency, and also the deputy leader for the National Green Party. Good afternoon to each and everyone.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Alexander. Just tell us about the resolve of the party, and I mean, we just heard some figures in terms of a third party not necessarily seeing success in terms of this type of contest. But what is the resolve of the party going forward? We know what you are about, what you represent. You've articulated what you are offering to the constituents. But how is your feeling right now in terms of coming out to vote yourself? And also
let me just answer that in a while. You could hear a siren coming through.
Yes, we have an ambulance passing.
Ambulance coming through, so just watch that one.
And just as you can see, we do have a lot of action now.
Yeah.
Suddenly picking up right here. But of course, now that the disturbance from the ambulance is away, I'm going to allow Aaron to continue his response to your question in terms of the
absolutely, a story is a story in a story in a story. Mr. Alexander, just tell us, first of all, what was your experience this morning going out to cast your ballot?
Wow, it was a bit of an adrenaline rush because for my first time, I was a bit nervous at first. But when I got there and, the way the presiding officers handled me, I felt very comfortable. Before I got in there, just walking down the streets and the amount of people that were greeting me and telling me, and chanting our catchphrase and our mantra, power to the people, while I was walking down coming to cast my vote, that gave me a great sense of reassurance and confidence. And I believe that the people are demanding better governance right now.
Okay.
And,
so
the whole feeling was, it was very, very nice, calm and cool and collective. And I just hang in there and I just went through the process,
Okay, thank you very much for that. We did have a chance to speak to the candidate for Castries East, your candidate for Castries East, Mr. Mohammed, and he did indicate that he had been doing some work in terms of assisting persons vulnerable in terms of getting to cast their ballots, and we know that is something that goes across parties, that goes across even independents and assisting persons. What is the work happening for Castries Central from your party in terms of helping the vulnerable be able to exercise that right today?
Well, I only assist those that request the assistance, but as far as I'm reckoned from the people from Castries Central, some of them are actually volunteering to bring their people themselves. So I did make my people available to assist them the best I could. But I've had 2 families so far who have somebody who's disabled, and they have assured me, Aaron, we're going to take care and bring our loved one. That vote is for you as well. So I find a lot of pressure is kind of off my shoulders because the people are willing to rise up and do things for themselves. And I really admire that because I believe oftentimes when it comes to politics, the politicians tend to take advantage of people who are disabled and so on in actually providing transportation for them on that one occasion to come and give them that vote. And after that, they turn their backs. They don't even go and visit the families for a whole 5 years. The family don't even see them anymore. So I don't believe in that kind of representation. So the fact that people are volunteering to bring their loved one to vote for me, if they need the transportation, they're going to ask. It's going to be on an ask basis. I'm not going to force anybody to tell them that I'm going to come and get their loved one and this and that and the other. I don't believe in that. And as much as possible, people who need assistance, they reach out. But if not, they handle it on their own, and I feel confident that they're going to give me the support because of what I have been espousing throughout my campaign, my platform issues, etc. I think my message has resonated with them, so much so that it has motivated and inspired them to get up and come out here and vote for me.
Okay, now going about the constituency, making assessments, observations, what are you seeing about the polling stations? Everything flowing smoothly so far?
Yes, I have the privilege of going around every polling station, being a candidate and observe what's happening everywhere. I must say that the polling booth, this cardboard structure, it was very creative and it's cheap, but it works. So I've gone around all of the polling stations and I've been observing. Things seem to be flowing quite nicely. I must say the turnout seems to be a bit low. I don't know if that is just indicative of the morning aspect of things. Maybe it might pick up in the afternoon, but as people know, they have until 6 p.m. The polling divisions, the polling booths close at 6. So I'm hoping that people will take the advantage of and come out and make sure that the votes are counted.
Okay, final question from me. Where is the NGP camp for results coming out this evening? We have some ideas as to where the SLP will be based, where the UWPs will be based, but what about the NGP?
Well, in the NGP, we believe a lot in decentralization of government. Sorry about that. We believe a lot in decentralization, especially decentralization of government. So we will be in our separate camps. We'll be at some of us will be at our home, some of us will be at our constituency offices. For me, I'll be in my constituency office. That's on the road. So we are pretty much scattered in our different areas and with our supporters and taking in the results.
Okay, thank you very much for that word there. Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. And thank you, Chayla.
All right, thank you, Jesse. We'll keep you guys updated as we continue to go around.
Okay, much appreciated. Okay, so we continue with the presentation, Mr. Samuel?
Sure, but I just hasten to add a point that I think bears noting. Very often, a lot of our constituents, express that sort of dissatisfaction or frustration that they don't see either the rep or the person who's aspiring to be their representative after the election. They see them, they offer, as Aaron just said, offer them a ride or whatever. But I think we need to look at this thing very seriously, because there's a difference between when you're governing as a minister, if you're a parliament, you can have these occasions to engage your constituents. But the sort of expectation that we have where our parliamentary representative, now some do a good job of it and probably undermines my point a bit, but the point is, as the society grows and the population increases, it becomes much more difficult for that sort of model to hold, where you can constantly be able to press the flesh in the way that people may like, because it's just sometimes it's humanly not possible. That's my view. What we need is probably they need to have surrogates, or they need to have structures to let the people feel more that they are catered for, that there's not less of that distance between who they are voted for and themselves. But we've had the expectation that the parliamentary rep goes to everybody's funeral. Now that works and sounds nice, but I wonder how practical that is, when you have to run a ministry and you have one constituency office. If you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs, for example, how's that going to work?
Well, you see, this is looking back at history, and this is looking back at the politicians and the representatives in the days of old,
right?
The who were very close. That was a close-knit community.
The George Mallet era,
exactly. George Mallet,
a small constituency of 1,000 people. But when you're talking about a constituency like in Grosley, registered voters are about 23,000 at this time. And there are people that in 5 years, despite your best intentions and effort, you may not be able to see in the close way that they may wish it to be.
But how can the politician, the modern day politician, compensate for that?
Well, that is where I think that's why I believe you should have local government, where you have a civic center. That civic center is located within that district, and people have a more intimate relationship with that civic center. And you have central government and you have local government. And then you have the surrogates are the ones that are constantly being there. And from time to time, of course, major events in the calendar, the actual parliamentary representative addresses and engages in various things. But it's not possible. I believe it's becoming increasingly more difficult to be able to keep to that model, which a lot of persons expect.
So strengthening of local government.
Yes, strengthening of local government.
Mr. Busquet?
Yeah, I wanted to come in on a couple of the points. I'll start back on the issue of what I describe as stability versus regime change.
Yeah.
As you were pointing out, that because some important projects will require more than 5 years to take off. But because every government has the right to determine policy,
Right.
We used to say it in a more colloquial expression: governments appoint and governments disappoint.
Yeah. Yes.
And we have these instances where one administration will start a project, it ends, you have regime change, and the new administration will not continue. Your suggestion is for there to be some sort of binding obligation, and that has been a problem everywhere. Like, we're not only talking about St. Lucia. In bipartisan societies like the United States in particular, how they have tried to deal with that historically was through the filibuster.
Yes.
Which really came up to provide each of the parties with the power to delay each other from taking decisions simply on the basis of their majority.
Yes.
So that the filibuster requires that you can only change a law with a certain amount of extra votes.
Exactly.
And not just by one vote.
Yes.
That has worked. It was meant to prevent the majority white votes from blocking laws that would free slaves. 100 years later, 200 years later, it is being used for any and every and everything. So that is an issue that has to be examined. But I would look at it from the standpoint that you made earlier of the difference between what I regard as philosophy versus what you described as expedience. At the development of politics, historically, the main difference between parties was theoretical, ideological, philosophical. You're either capitalist or socialist. Today, you have had a lessening of the philosophical differences and an increase of the expediency by more parties electing to go not for what you historically have supported, but what is going to bring you more votes down the road. That is an interesting situation, because historically what I think is the best manifestation of how what goes around comes around is that you look at China today. The Communist Party of China is the driver of the world economy, has China with the United States foreign debt in its back pocket. Okay, so that you find that in today's world, philosophy is less applicable at the level of global trade between China and the United States. So they have an annual trade war, or trade war before every election. But then the basis of that difference is ideological.
Yes, of course.
So the extent to which in Caribbean societies we are able to have the right balance between the philosophical necessity for politicians and politics to serve people vis-a-vis, yes, the need to keep people happy, but not, in my view, not at the expense of curtailing the philosophical points that brought you into, and that is that you are in politics to help. Invariably, what you have today is candidates wanting to enter politics for the sake of the power, the positions, and not necessarily for what can be done. So you have the situation where across the Caribbean, after every election, you have to be able to distinguish between an elected candidate, a candidate who won, has three positions. And that is, one, you're a district representative representing all of the people who voted for you in that constituency. Secondly, you're a cabinet minister in a cabinet. And thirdly, you're a member of parliament. Now, how do you navigate between these three positions all in one but some of which override the other. And I think there again, it boils down to the quality of candidates. How do you choose a candidate? Should a candidate just be somebody who could win enough votes, or somebody who, before becoming a candidate, has read the Constitution, understands the standing orders of the House of Assembly, understands you know, the difference between being an MP, a cabinet minister, and a member of a district representative. Winners having to remember that you represent also the people who voted against you. Invariably, you will find that winners tend to concentrate in those areas where they won, and in some cases ignore areas where they lost. It's a regional phenomenon. Again, it boils down to the quality of the candidate. If the candidate is running simply to get into office, to be a cabinet minister, and the best way one could determine that is by looking at the response of winning candidates who do not get cabinet positions. That creates a problem with any party that has won. You know, you even in cases where a party won all the seats, Barbados and Grenada, the ruling parties won all the seats. But guess what? One of those who won has to be leader of the opposition. Under the Constitution. Yeah. So here is a Constitution requiring that you have to go against. You have to be in the opposition. And having won on the party's ticket, because the party won all, you have to play the opposition role. And that brings into question, we can't go into it right now, but the whole question of the way in which our parliamentary system was designed to ensure that you have government and opposition. Yes. And the late great Hunter Francois, who did not run as an independent, as many people felt, but when he pulled out of the United Workers' Party as Minister of Education, he called a public meeting. I could never forget, I was still at school at the time, but in that public meeting, he was promoting a booklet he had written entitled The No Party State. And his argument, way back then in the late 60s and early 70s, was that a one-party state is not for us. Of course. A two-party state is too divided, because it is calculated to have government and opposition, so that you must have opposition even if the people vote all government. The system says you must oppose. So this insertion of an opposition automatically is something that we need to look at for the reasons that I have just explained. But let's continue.
But aren't we so focused on, zoned in on the two-party governance that we have, we distracted, you know, and not seeing those other the potential of these other ideologies?
Yeah, well, what Hunter Francois was saying, and that is something that young scholars need to research. Explore. You're not going to get the publication, but it is most likely available at the archives or in the records of the Voice. But the archives would be able to assist, and Hunter Francois' paper was for a no-party state. And it was looking at the fact that all of the parties in St. Lucia came out of the Labour Party. Yeah. Okay? And he was saying, and we are seeing it today, that when the cross-the-floor phenomenon takes place, what you eventually see is that it is the same St. Lucians in different parties who could easily take a walk on the basis of not agreeing. And therefore, you need to be able to have what is called bipartisanship, where parties tend to only look for bipartisanship in Parliament, by saying that the two sides should get together in the national interest. But I think bipartisanship should also include what Mr. Samuel was indicating when he was saying that the parties need to come up with some sort of binding obligations that says, you know, if a project is of national importance and it has to be delivered, it really doesn't matter which party delivers it.
Right. Yeah.
But you know that successive or succeeding governments will continue projects of national interest that go beyond party descriptions.
Yeah. I just want to, I know you have a contribution, but we have a live update coming from the field. Mr. Alex Bousquet, good day to you, sir.
Here at the PI Combined School, and the reason for this is we have been to most of the polling stations in Choiseul, also in Labrie. Labrie has 4 polling stations, the boys and the girls' school, and 2 others. These polling stations are more sort of dormant. But here you can see an influx of people this afternoon coming in from work, and most of them have the uniforms and they are coming in to exercise their rights to vote. And we thought that was important, that you see an influx of people coming in on the afternoon time to exercise their right. And this is why we are back here at the PI Combined School, because the other polling stations are now sort of dormant.
Okay, thank you for that update. So tell us what is happening now. Are we seeing persons who were at these other polling stations now relocating?
No. It's just persons who have not voted, and they are now coming out from their workplaces, their work establishments, coming in to vote before the polling station closes.
Okay, understood. And what are the numbers looking like right now?
The numbers are looking refreshing. As to others, 6 and 7 and 10. Over here you have almost 150 people still, and some still trickling in. Okay,
we did get word from Earl Bousquet that usually in the morning we have things are slow because you have a larger volume of persons, but later on in the day things speed up in terms of persons being able to cast their ballot in a shorter space of time. Is that what you're seeing happening?
This is exactly what's happening here. The lines are getting shorter in short time, and yes, they are speeding up. But like I said, more they speed up, more people trickle in. So the lines look like they're not moving, but they are.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Bousquet. Just keep us posted as to how things go from there.
Sure, Beth. Not a problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We now go back to Chela out in the field in Castries Central. Earlier we spoke to Mr. Aaron Alexander representing the NGP, and now we have running as an independent, we have Mr. Richard Frederick joining Chela. Chela? Hi, Chela. Can you hear me?
Jesse?
Hi. Good day to you and Mr. Frederick.
Listen, this is, I was saying a little while ago that things were slowing down, but they're picking up in different ways and forms, because we were literally chasing down and following a candidate in the back of a pickup van, and that is Richard Frederick, who is going up for Castries Central, as you rightfully said, as an independent. So that was quite exciting, let me tell you, because you were like, wait, you were following us? You're like, hey, we got to get the news. So we have Richard here right now, so I don't want to stall any longer. I will hand you over to Jessie Leos, who will ask you all the things that she would like to know right now.
Provided I could hear. Hi, Jessie.
Hi, good day, Mr. Frederick. How are you? How has the day been?
The day has been fine. I mean, it started off when I saw the turnout. I was taken by surprise, totally flabbergasted. There was a demonstration of anxiety, zeal, and everything else, enthusiasm. People just wanted to go out and vote. They just wanted to vote. And normally, once you find that people are so bent on voting, is in most instances, in the majority of circumstances, I beg your pardon?
Huh? I say by your call, as you know it.
Mr. Frederick, can you
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you continue?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we seem to have had some technical difficulties there, but the word from Mr. Frederick on the day's proceedings, and of course giving his indication of the large voter turnout in the constituency of Castries Central. So Mr. Richard Frederick there going up as an independent candidate in the constituency of Castries Central there. We will keep you posted on what is happening in that constituency. Yeah, hopefully we can perhaps get him again. Not sure what transpired there. But we continue with your contribution, Mr. Samuel, before we got that insert.
Yes, thank you, Jesse. Earl raised a number of interesting points that I just want to actually expound on a bit. The whole process by which we select candidates is you know, it's interesting because it is essentially an exercise done at the level of a group, at the level of a party, which is not necessarily a national anything. It is only by accident, it's only by coincidence, or not by design for sure, that the internal calculus of that party's in terms of who they deem suitable for to contest a particular seat may have the skill set or the experience that will redound to the benefit of the society in terms of governance, the ability to govern, and in terms of discharge ministerial responsibility and so forth. Because the calculation of the party or the group at that instance is really largely, if not only, about getting a majority, winning a seat. Now, that sort of sort of focus, you know, single focus, you know, it's an unfortunate situation. But why do we have parties? Parties are just a means to an end. Essentially, really, a group of people that are presenting a different package in terms of policies for governing and to make decisions. Hopefully, that will raise our standard of living and benefit everyone. So that, to me, is a bit of a flaw or gap, where we repose so much trust in the hands of a group, a party, that will be about its business in terms of trying to solve its own problems of, you know, getting as many people to contest seats based on its own calculation of who can win. Now, that criteria will be things that are maybe parochial or local, comes from a family that's well known, you know, has some reach or you know, intergenerational regard or something like that. Not necessarily the ability to be a good minister. That is a secondary calculation. And it is only after, like say tonight, we have a winning group or set of people, then that calculation is a problem for the political leader to solve. Now, I think that is something that really bears further scrutiny, because that is the only place I know that the fit for purpose, the goodness of fit for a job is not different, is so different to in every other sphere. If you want to be to play on a football team, you have to come to that team with some skill. If you want to be a mechanic and open people's bonnets and start to change parts, you must have some skills that match it with that job. But in this thing where we have this political arena where people are given responsibility to make laws binding on us, affecting everybody, not just those that voted for them, can influence what relationships we have with other countries, can decide whether we are party to international organizations or not, or whether we stay in CARICOM or don't stay in OECS, or anything is left to a sort of chance, which I think bears, you know, further reflection. The other point I want to raise, Jesse, is the nature of the politics, because of the two-party kind of formulation, lends to a certain tribalism. Now, I thought we left the tribe thing in Africa, and we decided to just be sort of a mixture of people that just benefit from our strengths regardless of whatever, instead of going on to this tribal, which is divisive and, you know, just separates us. But we got a certain tribalism, and so the message is not important, but the messenger is more important. So if I wanted to say something that I would have to give it to another person to say it. Maybe it might have more traction in that place, because it's not about the message; it's about the messenger and the association. That is associated. What you are aligned to, and that is not very good for a small society. And that's one of the things I liked about Sir John Compton. What I heard from him is that sometimes he would take a person and give that person to be in position, even if he did not always agree with that person, or if that person had the best skill set. And I think I saw that in the representative of Sir George Odlum at the United Nations. He was a guy of, an Oxford graduate.
Oratorical skill.
Orator and all of that. And what better person to have there and to go in the battles out there for us international world. Although these two were adversaries at the political level, they fought all their fights. But he saw that he had talent and he can still serve his country.
And this may very well be happening now.
Okay, well, hopefully so. But the point I'm making is that tribalism is something that really we need to revisit, and it also leads to a situation and expectation of the support base, because I'm on your side, I have invested, and so there's that expectation thereafter. And we have also the issue of, because it's so tribal, when you lose, what happens? If you lose, it's almost like you become a pariah the next day. No matter how good a minister or good a parliamentary representative you may have been the week before. And what does that do? Because it's almost like you should be banished, or you're a leper. You used to have these things where people who are lepers are banished and put out of society in exile or something. And these are the kinds of issues I believe we need to look at if we want to address all of the other concerns that we have about governance. Because if not, people will be rational and prepare what I call for the winter of life. Like the bear. The bear hibernates after having, consumed a lot of food to prepare for the long haul. And that is the kind of thing that I think can happen in the politics, because people take a risk, their families are affected as well, all those that are associated. It's an investment of not just yourself, your children at school, your family, all get that scrutiny and can get the third degree burn, so to speak, because of that tribalism.
I wanted to bring in a point you mentioned earlier having to do with constituencies, constituency boundaries, sizes of constituencies, and what I call balkanization of our maps, because not many people understand how constituency boundaries are drawn. In some constituencies, more than we would realize, the boundary is a road.
Yeah.
So people on one side of the road vote in one constituency, and people on the other side are in another constituency, but they use the same standpipe. The way in which constituencies were supposed to have been drawn were on two bases: geographical, but also in terms of representation, the number of persons. And what we have, unfortunately, is a number of constituencies that have become too large for management between elections. You look at Grosley, you look at Castries East, you look at several other constituencies, Castries South East. They have really expanded and the populations have grown, but the constituency boundaries have not been redrawn as required by the Constitution, again on the basis that if the body that has to decide is one which is government appointed and it is based on numbers, then you will never have a situation where you will have joint agreement on the expansion of constituencies. And what eventually happens is that the constituencies continue to grow. Once upon a time, Castries and Grosley represented 40% of the population.
Yeah.
That was in the 70s.
Exactly.
You want to look at Castries and Grosile today, and the percentage of St. Lucia's population that resides between Castries and Grosile,
is more.
the amount of seats. If we make that exercise, we will realize that until constituencies are redrawn, we are going to continue to have the problem every 5 years that representatives of those constituencies will continue to have the problem of being able to equally represent the growing sections of the constituency.
Okay, Mr. Samuel?
Yes.
We keep on interrupting.
Well, that is a dynamic and fluid.
Absolutely.
I think, and it's very, yes. Just to go along with what Mr. Bosque was saying, I mean, yes, you could see a sort of major disparity in terms of the size of these constituencies. I mean, Grosile in 2016 had over 20,553 registered voters, and now in 2021 that has increased by over 3,000 to about 23,000 registered voters. You compare that with Dennery South, which has 5,005 in 2016, almost 4 times, a factor of 4 times, and that's on the polar ends. We had a similar situation years ago in Castries Central, which was a relatively small seat, but that is, with the redrawing of the boundaries of Castries Central, that has increased a bit over time. On average, a lot of the constituencies hover about 8,000 mark, thereabout, most of them, except the big ones being, of course, Castries Southeast, Castries and Grosile, Castries North, and Castries East. Okay, but some others are coming, growing. One of the growing communities.
And they're all in the north.
Yes, all in the north. Barbono is growing quite a bit as well. Barbono is over 11,000, and it's quite a growing community.
There's an urbanization.
Yes, a bit of urbanization.
Yes,
urban. Yes. I think the 2010 census had Castries, an environment population as 68,000, and Grosile was at almost 25. When you add 25 of 68, that's like 83,000, and that is like almost 50% of the population of St. Lucia was located between Castries and Grosile, and that is the kind of, what I call skewed pattern of settlement that we have, and its implications for constituencies.
Yeah. And one of the implications for the rural community is that you have the skilled individuals, you have individuals who are educated, perhaps moving into the more urban areas. And I mean, even heightening the call for more development in these areas, even every 5 years we get the call for increased development, increased capital, infrastructural works happening in those areas. So it all ties into, persons leaving and not having that same sort of intellectual ability, human resource to really put in the work to develop these areas.
Yeah, but I think given the island size is a small island, I mean, we basically have probably 2 main areas that will drive growth in the future, and the more immediate one would be the south, the Southern Cone, Vieux Fort and environs, and the other one would be, I call the northeast shoulder of Dauphin, that space which is still pristine and sort of not much happening there. So much that Dauphin has almost disappeared in terms of our day-to-day palace. As a district, it's almost blended into parts of Dennery North and parts of Grosile and that sort of. But Dauphin, when I was growing up, is a district of a division of St. Lucia, just like Praslin. Praslin has diminished. Praslin is treated like this little area, but Praslin is actually separate to. You have Dennery, and then you have Micoud, but Praslin is in between. But Praslin is almost some sort of nondescript small space that is attached to Micoud and so forth, but if in time I think we will see these areas rising up as we start to concentrate some development of key niche infrastructure that will be a pull factor to bring in people to settle, and as long as you have settlement, the other dynamic will unfold, and you'll get a sort of rebalancing over time. But clearly, because of our hotel, as a tourism-led country, and all the hotels are more or less on the west coast, in the north, and well, Marigot into Gros-Islet, a lot of persons with skills that are used in that sector, for whatever part of the world, a country that they come from, will be drawn into that area, the chefs and the other persons, and eventually sometimes they settle in that area and visit where they came from, sort of less and less frequently until it's just Christmas time alone. They start going on the weekend, and then after a while it's only Journée Creole or maybe Christmas time, and that is because of where employment opportunities are concentrated.
Okay, we have another update coming from Irma. Unfortunately, regrettably, we couldn't get her clearly in real time, but we do have some recordings of her work covering the Vieux Fort North and South areas, as well as her trek over to Labrie. Take a look.
We are at the Grace Combined School, still in the Vieux Fort North community, or constituency rather. We are seeing a steady increase in the number of electors online. What we've noticed within this constituency, both Vieux Fort North and Vieux Fort South, is that a number of people came within the early hours, between 6 o'clock, 8:30, ensuring that they cast their ballot, cast their vote. In Vieux Fort North, the people who are vying for representation, Moses Jabatis, who's the incumbent, as well as Vincent London. As you can see, well, the queue behind me, they are following COVID-19 protocols. We are seeing masks on, as well as sanitation stations being administered as well. So that is our report from Grace Combined School within the Vieux Fort North constituency.
Okay, and we have another stop from Ms. DeMac again. Let's just take a look at her second contribution.
We're in the constituency of Labrie. The polling station we are at right now is the Labrie Boys Primary School. As you can see, it is a bit quiet, not much action going on here. Similarly, within the Vieux Fort constituencies, we saw a lot of people coming out within the earlier parts of the morning, so 6 a.m. To about 8:30 a.m. and it is anticipated that probably after work that we will get an influx of voters coming in, but that is currently the situation at Labrie. So if you are within the Labrie constituency and your polling station is the Labrie Boys Primary School and you're looking for a quiet time, you're looking for a downtime to come out and vote, now would be the opportune time to do so. Of course, within this constituency, you have incumbent Alva Baptiste looking to retain his position as parliamentary representative, and contending is Francisco Japierre. So again, if you are within the Labrie constituency, your polling station is the Labrie Boys Primary School. It is a great opportunity for you to head down and place that ballot.
Thank you, Irma, for those updates. We do hope that we could get you on the live before things end, but we really do appreciate those recorded updates in the meantime. So giving updates on Vieux Fort North polling stations, we know that the incumbent, Moses Baptiste, contesting. Also, Vincent London from the UWP is contesting as well. Vieux Fort South, we have Dr. Kenny Anthony, the SLP incumbent, and Herman Gil Francis from the UWP. And over in Labrie, we have Alva Baptiste, SLP incumbent, and Francisco Japierre from the UWP. And we invite you, as Herma indicated, if you want to go vote today, you still have much time to do so. You could go on to sluelectoral.com, and that's sluelectoral.com. So you could just put in your name. It's as simple as that. Put in your name so that you can find out where you're registered to vote, if you're registered to vote, and the polling station more specifically, so that you can take advantage of this time. It's been a full day and people have been up since the crack of dawn. Yeah, including the production team here at the GIS and other media teams, persons working with the electoral office and so on, to facilitate this national exercise. And it is something that has been highly anticipated. It's based on the COVID-19 situation, the pandemic that we've just come through. Is one to watch, one that will be historic. And we do hope that you are able to find time to participate, find time to exercise your right to vote. So go on there if you're not sure, SLUELECTORAL.com to get some more information, yeah, for you or someone you know. We continue with Mr. Samuel with the presentation and our ongoing, what has become our conversation, so to speak.
Mr. Samuel, one other thing from your earlier intervention, and that is the whole interesting question of why Monday for elections. And it's interesting that you have found that 8 out of
9.
9 out of
17.
17.
Yeah, 9 out of 17 have been on Mondays.
Yeah.
Okay. It would be interesting to look at the years in which they were not on Mondays, but my understanding of how Mondays became the chosen day is that invariably when you have the election date set on a Monday, everything heads towards that final weekend.
Yeah.
So the parties ensure they do all of the work that has to be done with the Electoral Commission up to closing time on Friday. Saturday is for mobilization, island-wide mobilization
yeah,
for Sunday's final rallies.
Yeah.
After which you get Monday, like today, when workers generally get time off to go and vote, and many who don't vote will still take the time off as a day off.
It's being dubbed Carnival Monday.
Yes. But that being so, we also have to look at what is the other choice, and that is a selected date, a prescribed date for elections. I am not sure that a prescribed date is that much better than a date, for lack of a better term, pulled out of a hat by a prime minister.
Yeah.
From the standpoint that is it the day on which you cast the vote, or is it the act of voting?
Yeah.
Because when it comes to the day, and you have a prescribed date, alongside with this prescribed date in today's electoral arrangements, you have laws against, or laws to control party funding.
Yes.
Now, the laws to control party financing are supposed to prevent parties from having an advantage on any other.
Right.
And one of the requirements is that the contributors have to register how much they contribute. Now, that has worked or has not worked in the larger countries, because you know, you want to make a contribution. Okay, if I want to give $10 million, I register 1 million and I find ways to give the other 9. you know, without it being known. If we transfer that to the Caribbean, 2 things make it difficult to introduce election financing laws in the Caribbean. One is that you will hardly find people who paid a little $5 and the $20 willing to put on paper that I gave the party. Because later on somebody is going to know I supported that party, and if tomorrow I change, then it becomes something around my
It's a bit much for an insular region.
So that we tend to say, well, all right, this is the new fad, this is the new style, so let's see how best we can do it. But in all of those cases, we have to look at our culture, our preparedness for adopting those features, and the extent to which they would reflect what we want to address. You know, is election financing, what laws for election financing meant to let my grandmother say how much she gave, or to prevent businesses from buying parties?
Yes. That is
you know, so that we might say, yes, we want to be sure that no party gets more finance than another. But irrespective, you know, there's a view that says laws are made to be broken. Caribbean people find a way around laws. We are good at that. I will not say that it's only us, but I know we're very good at finding ways to say what we want to say in other words. And it's not only confined to people who are highly educated. And that's one of the reasons why our Creole announcers, when they're good at it, you know, they get the listenership, you know, and so that will, with your permission, allow me to do something that was not intended, but it is not anything bad, and that is to ask our viewers to bear with us and allow me, on behalf of us here, to address St. Lucians in Creole.
Go ahead.
Because it is very important as a bilingual society that we do not forget ever that we have to get the message across, and it has to go across in the best ways. Avec ça, nous avons fait ici à après-midi, nous avons participé à des activités qui a différentes stations TV avec radio cette les venir ensemble pour nous ça suivre l'élection en manière nous te fait ici depuis 5 heures bon matin. Avec ça, c'est un bagage qui est très important pour nous ça supporter, puisque normalement différentes stations qui fait compétition avec yon a l'autre pour couvrir l'élection. Avec si tout le monde n'est pas garder pour aller en différentes places ou qu'il toujours qu'à mancher ça ou pas jeune. Avec aujourd'hui nous à sur NTN, DBS, 20 et Rhythm FM. Avec ça veut dire nous en tout caille, nous à sur tout radio, nous à sur tout télé. Avec moun ça suivre nous, avec nous ka joindre information qui sorti en ces constituencies, avec même si de là nous ka une petite difficulté, mais nous ka joindre indication qui ça qui a fait en différents paroisses là, avec yon ces bagaille là qui nous attendent plus, c'est manière bagaille slow, ligne n'a pas long, moun pas ka sorti. Mais à présent, si nous regardons, nous en avons avec 15 minutes pour nous ça aller voter. Avec ça, c'est laisser pour qu'on vote et que vous voulez voter. Aller côté où tu votes dernière fois, ou quand je c'est juin 100 yards là, et bien c'est bon. Avec you quand du côté pour aller, si c'est même place là, et bien si c'est en l'autre place. Mais si vous pas quitter Caillou à présent, pour ça aller à point ligne avec les 6 avenues ou pourquoi sur ligne ou perdre contre des talons derrière contre des talons. Alors nous ca encourager monde qui pour vote aller à vote. Si ou pas savent que pour vote là ni monde qui là pour un deux avec ou pas besoin obligé ni ID cadeau et bien un passeport pour voter. Depuis non là à ce voters list là ou ba yo non et que ça ba preuve qui ça c'est où qui là yo kay facilité pour ça vote. Mais pas juste rester là kay avec dit moi pas savent que pour aller. Si vous voulez voter, allez voter. C'est ça mon chef lady.
Lan moun ki ka ede ou.
Oui, là des monde qui kaya ndo. Qui te kayo? Ay vote. Ou anek ni yone et 15 minutes encore. Après ça on pourrait faire l'autre 5 ans.
That way. Just as you were just speaking about that, I thought to commend the electoral officials who have been out from the crack of dawn as well, working very hard. I mean, this morning, for many, it was probably difficult to get out of their beds because of the rain. You know, if you're living under a galvanized roof, it feels so good. You want to stay in. But we definitely want to say kudos to the electoral officials who have come out to help us, help facilitate this process whereby St. Lucians and residents of St. Lucia who qualify can exercise their right to vote.
Did you ever get a chance to ask any electoral official why the voting time, which is normally 12 hours, is now 11 and a half, because normally, historically, elections start at 6, but this year it starts at 6:30.
Yes.
It's 6:30 to 6, because historically, people have to have everything in place so that voting actually starts at 6. But for some reason that I haven't heard an explanation
for that, it's definitely
it was now if the law says 12 hours and we do it at 11 and a half, would there be a legal challenge? Hopefully not. But I'm curious, the journalist in me is curious to know if the purpose of elections is to encourage people to vote, and we're in the COVID period when social distancing and restrictions are going to impede the process. That would be the wrong time to make it shorter, but there must be a reason.
Absolutely, and I definitely look forward to hearing the explanation from the chief electoral officer, as well as just the weigh-in from the observers on this adjustment.
But to add to this, what I gathered is that as long as you are on the line, even if it's 6 p.m., you are after 6 p.m. and you are on that line before 6 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. So the exercise itself, as that line finishes, might go well past maybe 6 o'clock, 6:10, 6:15.
Yeah, but that's the end of the voting period.
Yeah.
We're talking about the starting.
Oh, the starting.
Starting at 6,
minutes.
because we're starting at 6:30 now.
Right.
It's always been that when 6 o'clock, whoever is on the line is there. And even if that takes up until midnight, you know, but whoever is on the line at 6 p.m. has a right to be counted.
Right.
My question is about the starting of the process has been delayed by 30 minutes, and it cannot be or should not be because you needed half an hour to get the place ready. So I think it would be an interesting story to find out why, so that at least inquiring minds could know.
Absolutely. And we now want to go to, before we go to that report, we just want to remind you of our continued program coverage of the general election decision 2021. We have a pollster, Mr. Peter Wickham out of Barbados at 6 p.m. He will be joining Rick Wayne, journalist Rick Wayne, again journalist Earl Bousquet, Lissa Joseph, Timothy Polion, and also Mr. Thomas Samuels will be there as well, providing sort of a panel, something that we have seen traditionally every election, where they go through the election results as they come in over the night. So definitely you want to tune in, something to look forward to. We have some heavyweights in political science, we have heavyweights in political survey, also journalists to weigh in on as well, and very experienced at that, because they can weigh in on previous elections as compared to the outcome of this one. So we encourage you to tune in to NTN at 6 p.m. Stay tuned to NTN for the course of the day, really, for quality programming when it comes to the general election today. So we now go to a report coming from Janelle Norville, and Janelle covered the Grosselet area. I'm not sure if she also covered Babonneau, but we will get to hear in this report. Take a look.
We're currently here at the Sports Academy, and we just spoke with one of the electoral commissioners, that's Ms. Zilta George Leslie, who indicated that the voter turnout is looking quite good thus far. She explained that there are long lines at all polling stations, reporting long lines so far, and so she attributes that to the electoral offices PR encouraging members of the public to go out and exercise their franchise, very much emphasizing the importance of the exercising one's franchise. We also see here at the various polling stations, and right now at the Sports Academy, we see the international observers. So we see representatives from the OAS as well as the Commonwealth. So we will go into our interview with Ms. Zilta George Leslie in a bit, as well as she also indicated the protocols that have been established to ensure safety as we are in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think we have an excellent turnout. I've seen so far for the stations that I've been to, there have been some very, very long lines, which means there are quite a few people who are interested in coming out and vote. So I think we did really good on our PR to try to get people to come out and vote. As it relates to the rain, we hope that it keeps up, but so far so good. I know some people were a little concerned about our tents, but so far I think that the conditions in the tents are quite good. I haven't gotten any complaints as it relates to our tents as yet. So I just pray that, you know, we continue to have a nice cloud cover, but not too much rain.
Okay, now voter turnout has been something of an issue, especially in the Rosewood constituency. We've seen a decline over the years in the voter turnout. So speak to us, like you said, your strategy, PR, and why is it important that individuals exercise that right?
Well, we believe that it is the right of every individual, every St. Lucian that has attained that age of 18, who has been registered to vote, and we have encouraged persons to come out and get that registration. We know that it has been quite a challenging time for us, so we are just interested in everybody coming out so that their voices can be heard. And I think we have achieved that. Based on the lines that we're seeing here and in all of the stations, voter turnout is high.
Awesome. Now, we're also doing this alongside the COVID-19 pandemic. Just share with us some of the protocols that have been implemented to ensure the safety of electors.
Okay, so right now, as some of you may be aware, we have the 2 sanitization points. So when you enter, you are sanitized, and you are also sanitized before you dip your finger into the ink. So this is one of the protocols that we have established. We also have the 3 feet, distancing on the lines. We have ensured that every individual who comes in to vote is wearing a mask. We have a few on hand, not too many, so it's not really an ad, but we have a few on hand in case someone has forgotten their mask. So I think we're pretty good. We're adhering to all the protocols. We had a full and comprehensive discussion and meetings with the Ministry of Health and the CMO, and so far, so good.
That was a member of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Zilta George Leslie. As she indicated, sanitization points, there are 2 of those protocols, COVID-19 protocols in full effect. Individuals must maintain 3 feet distance from each other on the lines. There are the sanitization points, like I mentioned, as well as we see international observers at the various polling stations throughout the constituency, observing what is happening on the ground.
We have been on the ground observing the elections from last Tuesday. We arrived. It's a team of 12 members. We were invited and accepted through the organization, and we're here representing the OAS, and we have persons from 10 different nationalities. So a very broad view. We've been interviewing different actors, government representatives, political parties, civil society, basically reviewing everything that has to do with the technical process of the elections, the logistics, and then getting a view of the different parties involved to see how things were going leading to election. And today, what we have been doing is going to the different polling stations across the island to review how the process is going. So that's the role. We will issue a preliminary report after there are some preliminary results. And then thereafter we shall issue our final result report in a couple of months.
What are key indicators that you look for that will tell you that we're having a good election?
Well, we are looking at different things, including the organization of the process, the information, how everything is being conducted. Generally speaking, in this election in particular, for example, we're looking at health protocols And so our interviews basically were to see how things were being structured, and then today we'll see how everything evolves during the day, or this is what we have been seeing up until now. We still have a little bit to go now today.
And on the other side of the spectrum, what would be considered discrepancies or red flags?
Well, in this case in particular, we have not seen significant red flags. We think that, well, first of all, we have to say that the different participants who we have interviewed were very confident in the Electoral Commission going into the elections. And we do see an environment of participation amongst the citizens, and there's a lot of enthusiasm to participate. So those are always good things going into an election. Since we started observing this morning, we've seen a lot of participation. There were quite long lines. Now they're slowing down, trickling down. We understand that maybe later they'll grow a little bit more. And this is always indicative that the process is flowing in a good manner. So I think that based on the fact that there are some additional health protocols and that may hold up the lines, for now we see that everything is going in a very fluid manner.
I am Janelle Noble signing out from the Groseley Primary School.
Thank you, Janelle, for that report. It's a synopsis of what's happening in the north of the island, just the polling stations, the Groseley Primary, also the Sports Academy there, formerly the Groseley Secondary School as well. Contesting the Groseley seats, just want to give you that information. We have the incumbent, UWP, Mr. Leonard Mantut. We also have the from the St. Lucia Labour Party, Mr. Sorry about that. From the St. Lucia Labour Party, we have Mr. Kenson Casimir. His name escapes me. Kenson Casimir. So we wish the two all the best. Continuing on, we just want to let you know there's still time to cast your ballot.
We also have the leader of the Green Party.
Yes,
also
right,
Decaris, yes. And come to think of it, we were just trying to get a chance to speak to him, but he figured that we had spoken to quite a few of the candidates for the NGP, so that should have sufficed. So thank you very much, Mr. Decaris, and wishing you the best as well. All the best as well. We have some drone footage before we continue and wrap up with our program before we prepare for the evening. Some drone footage coming out of that constituency. So from the same Groseley Primary School of the constituents, the electorate actually still coming out to vote. So persons are making the most of the time, really. We've seen throughout the day the polling stations being well populated, well, with most of the polling stations being well populated with persons lining up to cast their ballots. So at this time, I would imagine that, you know, it's time when persons are leaving work, having had a full day of work, going to work as normal in the morning, now coming from work and going in line, and some maybe undecided voters for much of the day now having a change of heart and heading out before the countdown. So we do encourage you, if you are deciding, you're coming to make your mind up, you really want to do it, but you're far, please try your best to go cast your ballot today. Yes, and you can go on to the website sluelectoral.com so you can exercise your franchise. Go on there, put your name in. If you're not sure if you registered to vote, you could put your name in there and you could see where exactly you registered to vote, more specifically the polling division. So there we have some aerial shots of the polling station, persons going in to cast their ballots. Mr. Bousquet, I mean, just coming off of Janelle's report there, you know, I know you wanted to make a point on, you know, women in politics, and just a continuation of that point that we made far earlier in the program.
Yes, we started off on that, and I'd like to end on it. Quite apart from all the points I've made about the need for women to see themselves and be made to be seen as equal human beings whose power to mobilize ought to be shared among the people and not just only used in support of male candidates. I was very encouraged by the fact that you have 10 women candidates out of the 45 in this election. And while that is not while that is not the usual 1/3, it is in fact more than 25%. And it is an interesting and encouraging number, but I particularly want to mention two women, one of whom has for the second time made herself available as an independent candidate. And I'm talking about Melanie Fritz, the independent Green candidate for Micoud South. She contested in another constituency in Castries in 2016, and despite not doing well at all, was not she didn't allow that to dissuade her, and she has now gone in another place where it is generally felt that she has no chance. But I would encourage women thinking of looking at entering politics to take a page from her book. Another one I was looking forward to this year but didn't hear from her was a young lady whose name I cannot quite remember, but in 2016 the Star newspaper did advertise her as saying she would certainly aims to be St. Lucia's first LGBT candidate. And that was a thrust that was new. At the time, I think it is still one that can be pursued, except that 5 years ago, when she wanted to be an LGBT candidate, 5 years later, she would have to be the first LGBTQIA. There's also A now. But nonetheless, these two young ladies, I would encourage others who tend to believe that politics is a dirty thing only for men to take a page from these two courageous young ladies who whose positions would breed opposition in the societies that we live in because of the nature of our societies. But they knew and they decided to do what they did. Bravo, I give them all the kudos.
Fostering a new culture. And also
Yes.
to mention Daisy Ann St. Rose out of the NGP, and also the candidates that are going up, the female candidates going up for both political parties in the main.
In fact, in Castries North, you have the most candidates, 4 seats, 4 candidates for 1 seat, 2 women.
2 women.
And 2 men.
Talk about gender parity. We continue. We're running out of time. Just 2 minutes to closure, and I think it's only fair that I give it to Mr. Samuel.
Yes, still continuing with our tidbits to look at our electoral map. For example, since we have started having elective politics, we have seen certain patterns in terms of how the electors vote. Labrie, for example, has only voted 1 party in our electoral history, and so that's quite an interesting, observation. Vieux-Fort South and Vieux-Fort North are similar, at least up to 1987. 1987 coming forward, they won. Well, I wouldn't call it a blemish. The one point that was different was in 1982 when Eldridge Stevens won that seat in Vieux-Fort South, and since then, so these 3 seats have been like the sort of that Southern Cone has been the home, almost the anchor of the Labour Party for the most part. Castries South as well. Castries South in terms of the Castries Basin, except 92 when Brathwaite won that seat, has always voted in one manner. On the UWP side, the only seat that one can say has voted one way, at least for much of our history, is Micoud North. And Micoud North, I'm hearing is like a battleground now, seat now, heavily contested and can go anyway. No, we can't make any inference from that at the moment. Most of the other seats have sort of undulated back and forth, different mixes, 3 times Labour, 2 times GWP. Soufrière, which we thought was that kind of mercurial kind of seat, had some stability, I think, for 4 consecutive terms with Labour, 2 with, I think, Walter Fassois, and 2 with Harold Dalson. So that was 20 years, and the pattern being broken with Herod Stanislas in 2016. So that seat was also fairly stable for Labour for quite a while. The other seat for UWP was Cashways North. Now, Cashways North for 3 consecutive elections, at least, after Mr. Jean, that would have been 2006, when Sir John came back to the next 3 elections, 6, 11, and 16 went with the UWP. That had been so. All other seats, including Babonneau, Ancillary, have vacillated, have moved between the 2 parties in different ways. A lot of those seats had a consecutive representation by the Labour Party in the first 2 terms of Labour Party from 1997 to 2001, and thereafter it's been any man's game, so to speak, going between the 2 parties. That has been the sort of general map we have. Now in this 2021, based on preliminary indications, some of what we're hearing from pundits, armchair pundits and other persons commenting on the election trends and observations, seem to think that there is a little more dynamism in typically bedrock seats of either party. In Cashways North, we have a different permutation at play there with the move of Mr. Stevenson King to be an independent candidate, and we also have that other independent candidate. So we have 2 independent candidates, so to speak. But interestingly, the SLP, which is a major party, is not fielding a candidate in Cashways South, neither in Cashways Central, which is what others read as tactical. I can't say, but that's what they say. So what I'm saying is that our electoral map, that's the point, is beginning to shift. We don't know how it will shift. All of the traditional things that we used to say, okay, well, we will not count Labrie will go one way, we will not count Beaufort North. We can't really say that anymore. Every seat is being keenly contested, and we will see later this evening how these projections pan out. So I'm just saying that the last 5 elections have shown a pattern that we kind of got accustomed to. We had a strong mandate given to a resurgent SLP in 97 that continued for about almost 10 years. And thereafter, we had the reintroduction of Sir John Compton, re-energizing the UWP, giving them new hope in 2006. And then since he's gone, they've been I've had 2 leaders since, and the Labour Party is also under new leadership with Mr. Pierre, and so we'll see how all of that pans out. So that's more or less what I'll say at this point, Jesse. Okay. Just to say that our electoral map is likely to be redrawn in ways other than we may have expected. We have an interesting indications are that Denry North will also be keenly contested, and all seats are basically in play. We can't call them for anyone. Later tonight, I guess we'll get a better picture of how it all unfolds.
But one thing that we can't escape is that in the COVID age, this is the new norm. So nothing is like normal anymore.
That's right.
Absolutely. But I wanted to ask before, we're just biding time until we get to speak to, we have something lined up, speaking to the Micoud South incumbent, that is Mr. Alan Chasney. Yeah. We should be hearing from him shortly. But in the meantime, I wanted to pose to you, I know you spoke a little bit about it earlier, but if you could go a little bit into the high voter turnout, the implications for these sort of trends when people come out in their droves to cast their ballot. What does this mean?
Well, the general thinking, and we have seen it go both ways, but the general thinking is that people don't usually vote for things, they tend to vote against things. Now, I don't know if that is true, but the thinking is that when you have it's harder for the incumbent to get the people out, all right? And when you have a high turnout, the thinking is that it does not bode well for the incumbent. That is the general thinking. If people feel motivated enough to come out, they feel, there's some reason that it's almost like the culture. If things are going well, people are short with their remarks. They say it's okay. They don't have very much to say. But if things are going bad, you have a lot to say. People have a lot to say, describe it. But if it's just if things are moving all right, they say, well, it's okay, nothing, and they're very short on it. So the fact that you have a large turnout sometimes, and I say sometimes,
Yeah.
because it can actually be the reverse sometimes.
It can be a coincidence.
It's quite right, where people feel sufficiently pleased with what has happened under the command and come in and give that endorsement and to ensure that the incumbent is retained. But what most pundits will say that most times when you have high turnout above trend, it sometimes does not bode well for the incumbent. I don't know where the turnout will fall at this election so far, but based on what we were hearing from those in the field, it would seem that there have been a high, steady trickle or high levels of participation and interest, at least, in the elections. But we can say what we like here, I guess, is when the numbers tally, we will know how it all pans out.
And also the management of COVID-19. I mean, we have really, in the St. Lucian space, nothing to compare it with.
Yeah.
We did have the examples, as you mentioned, the other territories in the region who have held elections in this post-COVID space, pandemic space, but we were essentially I should say the United Workers' Party administration is a pioneer, a local pioneer in pandemic management, so to speak.
Yeah.
So what are the likely implications of this in terms of the electorate observing and watching as compared to nothing?
See, the difficulty with succeeding with some things is like it doesn't really, it's not sexy, it does not really make much news. Because you avoided an accident, you avoided something. But it's when the thing happens, then you get all of the interest and all the different perspectives of people weighing in. So, in other words, there's no counterfactual, when the good thing has happened, you don't know. It's like you avoided something from happening, the worst case scenario. So, I am not sure to what extent it has been. That's why I was interested in that poll, exit poll, to get a sense of, what are the factors that really weighed heavily on the minds of voters in influencing their vote, and to rank that, whether COVID, management of COVID weighed heavily on their minds, because the failure to do so would mean, what would it mean? It's like closure of the economy, higher rates of deaths, and all of the ramifications of that, and the ability of the government to manage the pay civil servants and all the rest of things that comes from the economy being basically put on hold. So that is where, but I'm not sure people are seeing that the nexus between the choices you make and their lives, So that is why I'm not sure it's really having the resonance it should have. Only if we are in a situation where there's that sort of the economy is closed, then I think the issue of the COVID thing becomes much more topical and more important. But to the extent that we are almost in a quasi-normal way, some people go to bed after 11 like myself, but most people go to bed before 11, so they're not really affected too much. That's like normal life, Apart from what reminds you is more about the need to wear a mask and sanitize everywhere you go, and some indication of social distance. But beyond that, most people are going to work and doing their normal thing. So it's not having, I believe, that kind of, it's not weighing as heavily as one might expect on the minds of people.
Okay, wonderful. We now go to a report coming from Janelle Norville, and she has been churning them out for us, letting us know what has been happening in the constituency of Grosselet. Take a look.
At the ground opposite the Harbour Club, where tents have been erected, this facility will be replacing the Johnson Center as a polling station. The Johnson Center, like I mentioned earlier, was not available this time around. The electoral department has assured that steps are being taken, and have been taken actually, to alleviate the mud situation and the hazard that it's posing, especially to the elderly individuals who are coming in on canes, on wheelchairs, and so forth.
It is obvious from what I can see that we have an issue here as it relates to the mud and the slippery surfaces. We, as you know, a 3-member body, and we are assisted in effecting the procedures and putting things in place for the election by the Chief Elections Officer, his team, which is a team specially put together for election purposes only, as well as the staff of the electoral department. When it came to locating polling stations, especially in the north, we had been used to using the Johnson Center. That center was not available. We looked around in the north and we could not find any suitable location in order to locate the polling stations. Even after we had selected a couple of polling stations, well, most of our polling stations, after the ELSA, we lost some of those because roofs from some of those had gone, and we were faced with a situation of finding polling stations and being able to meet the increase in numbers as it relates to trying to facilitate the COVID protocols, which caused us to have to get more and to increase the number of polling stations to facilitate the COVID protocols. And in our quest to do that, we had no alternative but to try to erect tents in locations that were fairly close to what the polling stations were in 2016. Now, I understand the people are complaining.
Interrupting that news report coming from Janelle Norville to bring you word from Miku South. We have the incumbent, Mr. Alan Chasney, who is speaking right now in an interview. Take a look.
Make sure that the level of separation. Okay, all right. So I think they're ready for us now. Live at the Tiroshe multi-purpose.
Okay, so profuse apologies. We seem to be having some technical difficulties, well, more or less with the bandwidth, but the interview is ongoing right now. Hopefully we could rebroadcast it for you or bring it to you in preparation of a comprehensive report of the general elections for today. Just want to remind you before we wrap up for this segment of our coverage of the general election decision 2021 that we have the director for the Caribbean Development Research Services, Mr. Peter Wickham. He's a pollster, widely known in the region, respected in the region for his work, coming on at 6 p.m. and he will be joining Mr. Rick Wayne and Mr. Earl Bousquet, as we've had in this program now, Ms. Lissa Joseph and Mr. Timothy Polio. Also, we have the political analyst, Mr. Thomas Samuel, joining them again. So it's going to be an explosion of weigh-in coming from all of these individuals who are experienced and well experienced in their fields to be able to contribute meaningfully as the results roll in coming from Parliament. So stay tuned for that. At 6 p.m. we have this panel coming on. And in the meantime, we encourage you to just stay tuned to NTN. You could turn off the television, fair enough, to go and do what you have to do, but make sure you come back at 6 p.m. sharp, yeah? We do have Mr. Bousquet preparing for the next program, also Mr. Samuel preparing for the next program as well. But when we come back on, we're coming on hot and heavy as the results come in. You want to tune into NTN for the results of Decision 2021. My name is Jessie Leonce, signing off for now. This has been the afternoon segment of our coverage for the general election. Do keep safe out there. We know tonight, either way it goes, will be a period of celebration, jubilation for many, and we do hope that you do so within the confines of the COVID-19 protocols. Keep safe out there, St. Lucia. We do hope that you do keep safe. Until we meet again, perhaps tomorrow or the day after. Well, certainly I will be out in the field this evening covering some of the camps, I believe in Castries North and Castries East. So if you see me, come on out and give me that interview in terms of your experience today, your voting experience, and when we have the results, what your experience is, how you're feeling, what your sentiments are going into this next 5 years. So signing off for now, preparation for the 6 p.m. Please tune in at 6 p.m. NTN is the place to be for the general election results. Goodbye.